Good afternoon and welcome to a regular workshop meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council. Today is August 28th. It is 5 p.m. and I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time. We'll start off, it looks like, with 3 potential action items, starting with action item A under contracts and agreements, professional service agreement, environmental issues, facilitation for Windjammer Park Phase 2 and the Clean Water Facility Interpretive Center, Amendment 1. And we have here at the table, I guess before we start this, we'll introduce those here at the table and welcome those that are viewing and with us here in the audience. So we'll start now. I am Mayor Bob Severance.
Councilmember Tara Heisen.
Bill Larson, council member.
Rick Omer, council member.
Joel Servadius, council member.
Blaine Noble, city administrator.
Brett Arvidsson, public works.
Kathy Rosen, Public Works Director.
Beth Nuns, Mayor Pro Tem.
Erica Wassinger, City Council.
Thank you. We'll turn it then to Brett and Kathy for item number 8.
Good afternoon. This is discussing our Enviro Issues Amendment number 1. This specifically talks about the Interpretive Center and Windjammer Park Phase 2. To start off with, we've worked with Enviro Issues on the Clean Water Facility project since 2010, from siting through construction. Specifically, Enviro Issues was deeply involved with the public involvement for Windjammer Park. Starting in 2016, we started the Windjammer integration plan, and they followed it through construction. And I consider their involvement very key to the success we're seeing today at the park. They played a central role in our ability to keep the community engaged through charrettes, advisory groups, public meetings, user surveys, and facilitation. They led our team in development of our information for the park project, including updates, websites, newsletters, a bunch of other materials, fence signage, and a couple of our events such as the Family Fun Day. They've also provided ongoing support for our council updates and strategic planning. We're moving into Phase 2, and as the mayor said at our June 29th grand opening of the park, we want to continue Oak Harbor's successful community-led improvements to Windjammer Park, and I feel very strongly about that personally because I think the park's success has been driven by the community and by the community's vision. We want to move that forward. Their scope of services is we're getting out early for several reasons. One is to assist staff with revisiting our Windjammer integration plan. That's been a very successful plan, and it's by no means obsolete, but we need to revisit it again. I think our vision, now that we have something there to look at, we should revisit our vision and see what we're doing. We also need to determine a management plan for Phase 2, how are we moving forward. Phase 1 was done under the auspices of our Clean Water Facility, our GCCM contractor, and design team with that. That project is coming to a close. Sorry about that. That project is coming to a close, and we're going to transition. The team that designed it last phase may not be the team that designs the future phase, because we're going to have to start off basically a new project. Not to discredit any of the people working on the team, they've done an excellent job for us, but we have to start fresh, and we can't guarantee them future work. We do need their consistency as we move forward with whichever team we use to carry forward with the public message that the community vision is important. And I think Enviro Issues can help us with that a lot. We need to step back and obtain public input on what we did on Phase 1. I think to me it's a very successful project, but we should ask ourselves what we do right, what we do wrong, and engage the community's opinion on that prior to initiating design. I won't be able to have design professionals on for Phase 2 until probably later this fall, if not first of the year. So we do need to get certain things done. I think we do need to ask these questions. We also have to assist the city with understanding and articulating the vision of future phases of Windjammer Park. I think this is especially critical to us as we move forward. We'd like to be in position to start chasing the funding cycles after the first year. So we need certain documents and plans together to do that so we can support those types of application. I think most important part is we have a lot of public momentum right now. The park is very popular. You go down there on a nice afternoon, you see hundreds of people enjoying our facility. And we want to keep that momentum and interest on future phases of the park. The other service that they would be working with us on is assisting staff in developing the public messages for the Interpretive Center. I'll talk a little bit more about that facility in our next contract, but we are using them to help us determine this environmental programs. How do we take our environmental programs and take very complex ideas and try to make them palatable for the public and make it popular for the public. We have staff, and we also have an Interpretive Center consultant identified, which is our next agenda item. He's not a graphics, he's a educator, but he's not necessarily a graphics person, so they can help us with some of the graphics concepts of that. And also we need to ask, this is a fairly large project in itself. I think we have $900,000 budgeted, so we do need to obtain public input on what we're trying to do and what results we have there. So we would like to use EnviroIssues to help us with those tasks. Anyway, this is an amendment to an existing contract. We're recommending that the City Council authorize the mayor to sign contract amendment number 1 with EnviroIssues in the amount of $68,730, increasing the total contract amount from $89,400 to $158,130. Questions?
Council? Yes, Councilor Servadius.
You just mentioned the number, you said this is a fairly big project, 900,000?
That's what we have budgeted for 2 years on the Interpretive Center.
Oh, an interpretive center.
925,000 is the budget for the Interpretive Center.
Okay, I thought that was all we had for phase 2, and I thought we had
No.
2.7 or
No,
7 point something.
Yeah, that's for the Interpretive Center. We want to make sure that we do get public comment on it. We're not going to create that in a vacuum.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
This isn't exactly, but wasn't EnviroIssues supposed to help us with the marketing of the fertilizer?
Yes, on a
And I
different.
didn't, that's a different?
That's a different contract, and it's ongoing.
Okay. And on the Interpretive Center, I saw some of the little requirements like visit the lot center. Some of us visited that, but we were mainly looking at how their plant downtown with their little, they didn't have Splash Park, but they had like the little creek with the natural grasses and stuff, and the restroom facility inside and the interpreter. But it looked great, but we didn't really take notes. Would 1 or 2 council members be able to go and be in on the discussion with the Interpreter Center with getting that done?
I was going to get into that a little bit on the next item with Chuck, but we have talked about having 1 or 2 council members sit in on our group of staff members to help guide us through that, and just like Councilmember Almbird and Servadius did on the clean water facility. So yes, and one of the very first things is scheduling a trip for everyone on that team to go visit Lot.
Those were just my 2 main questions that I didn't see, and it's like, okay, I'm confused. Is it a different contract, or did we drop that from this type of thing? Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor Wasserman.
So this is also for phase 2. So is it going to be a similar scope of work to kind of what we did in the past for phase 1, where we had, public open houses and
This first phase right now is we only have 1 public meeting planned. I think what we have to do is there's a variety of issues with phase 2, and we want to make sure that before we start, right now we think we can live with a simplified public involvement plan, but that may not be possible with the issues we have involved, because we have the lagoon, the windmill. Bixma Improvements has a lot to say with how we've talked about the central entrance to the city. So we would like to get some thought process moving on that. Then if we have to do a more expanded public involvement process, we'll decide that. Right now, we don't think we need to do that, but we can't guarantee at this point. That's part of the process here is figuring out what do we actually need to do.
So I've been approached, and as I'm sure everyone has, people will write me a message about, oh, I'd like to see this, or I like this, right? Great things, great ideas, great people, I love it when people come up, show me pictures or have I saw this somewhere, this. So I've been sort of like saving them. Is there a certain place you want us, if we get a suggestion or comment on the site, to send to you or to Hank, or where would you like us to forward our citizens' ideas?
Part of the job here is when we have a meeting set up to solicit those comments, we're going to do the online survey again and all that. Okay. Our website is obsolete, so we're going to rebuild our website for phase 2. So we'll have the ability to put comments in there, and we have content. And I'm assuming as a project manager, I'll be the main contact like I have been in the past. So we definitely want people's
ideas, for sure.
And this, like I say, we want to ask early before we get putting any pencil to paper.
Luckily, most are along the lines of what we've already, sort of have pictures of phase 2. It's, people I think are just excited and have ideas and want an amphitheater, want to see it used, want teachers to use it once. I just hear all kinds of fun ideas.
I walk out by the splash park, checking things out, and I have several people stop and I'm a regular Whippy Coffee, and I get asked every morning that.
Yeah, I know. I was at a Monroe McDonald's and a long conversation with somebody who's a resident here. Was going up the hill and I was coming down. So certainly there's public interest, and one of the things I was able to tell the individual was there's going to be a public process to provide input. And what we did too is we laid out the original one in 5 phases, and we kind of built a hybrid of half of 1, half of 2, and half of 3. So it really needs to be kind of reiterated. I think we'll use that as the basis, but we didn't build it. Phase 2 is kind of like 2.5 phases, so it's kind of a different. So it kind of opens it up a little bit, and so I think there needs to be further discussions to figure out what phase 2 is going to look like. Even though we kind of have a plan to begin with that we had to begin with, but we may want to tweak it some.
And we may want to open new ideas because, frankly, where we were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we did the plan in 2016. Now we have something there, and people can see it, and I'm hoping for a lot more enthusiasm for it. And I really want to keep that enthusiasm, and that's why I want to start as early as we can.
Thank you.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think that the water treatment facility that we have is a resounding success, and I and my children, we love the park. I just want to go back a little in history. The last time we talked about approving an extension and additional monies for enviro issues, and there was this sense of urgency at the time because it was like, oh, we're running out of time, the contract is about up, and there were a number of questions that were voiced by numerous people in the room about, are we getting value for our dollar? And I don't think those questions were ever adequately answered, and here we are again. This is the first I've seen of those numbers, and we're being asked to take an action item. So we're going from 68,000, or excuse me, from 89,000. We're adding almost 69,000 for a grand total of $158,000 for messaging. It was very important the first time around. We had to get the word out. People didn't understand what we're doing, but now they do. I get we have some other things to do, but those questions for me were never adequately answered the first time. I was looking over this list of deliverables, and it seems like there's a lot of planning of meetings and attending a few meetings, but not actually running the meetings. There's a long list of things that the city will still be responsible for providing and paying. And there's some overlap in the next item that we're going to talk about here with the professional services agreement with Lennox Institutes. So I'm not really comfortable right at this moment adding another $68,000, because what we're being asked to do tonight is a grand total of add $90,000, $530 in spending between these two items A and B. And then there was some uncertainty on page 10 of our packet. There's 3 different numbers here. The first two, there's not a significant difference. At the bottom of Amendment 1, it says the final total is $68,730. In the write-up up above for the payment, it says $68,566. But what caught my attention was about the cost of services according to the hourly fee schedule provided below, with a not to exceed total price limit of $90,400. So I don't know where we're getting that total, because when you,
That was an older version.
okay, so that's still,
Yeah, the 68 is the number.
all right, because I didn't know how much of an overage we were
No.
working into here. But I don't know what the sense of urgency is. Having never seen these numbers before, not seen this proposal, this is the first time for me this week getting our packet. I still am not convinced that with the list of deliverables that we have here, that this is value added and that it's worth another $69,000. I get we had a great relationship with them, but when I have asked in the past, hey, show me tangibly what we've gotten, I haven't really gotten anything back on that. A few things here and there, but certainly not worth $158,000 worth. I'd like to see the list of deliverables fleshed out, or I'd like to see what is driving this cost as high as it is, and I don't see the benefit moving forward of adding this. So I can't support this at this time with the information that I have.
May I
Yeah,
respond to that? So this contract amendment for enviro issues is for two separate capital projects in our budget. So one is Windjammer Phase 2. The other is for the Interpretive Center. And that's all lumped into one contract amendment, that total.
Right, I read that.
$68,000. So what Enviro Issues has done in the past, and why we think there's value, is they facilitate the meetings. I don't know if you've ever attended any of the meetings that they've facilitated, but they are very good at drawing out what people have to say. Some people are reluctant to come forward. They're very good at that. I don't think we have anybody on staff that has those kinds of capabilities. The other thing that they did on Phase 1 and would do on Phase 2 is the online survey. And then they take all of those results and they prepare a report for us and do that, the analytics of that. We don't do that. Again, we don't really have that expertise on staff. And the other thing, as Brett mentioned, is they have the graphic capabilities that Chuck Lennox does not. So, and that's for the Interpretive Center specifically. So those are three things that I think bring tremendous value that we don't have the ability to do on staff, at least within Public Works. And I would say Steve probably would say he doesn't have that in his department either. So unless there's someone else in the city that can do that, we need some outside help. Whether that's Enviro Issues or someone else, we really need that assistance in this to make it a successful public outreach and scoping.
Mayor, may I add something to that?
Yeah.
Mr. Larson, I think it's unfortunate that we don't have that example for you right here this evening, but the demonstrable proof I think that you're looking for, one place to look for that is in the Windjammer Park Integration Plan, which was the culmination of the past public process that these folks have been discussing. And in the back of that document, you can see sort of the chronology of the things that Enviro Issues has helped us with, because it's the meeting summaries from the in-person meetings, it's the, as Kathy says, it's the surveys, and then it's the integration of all that information, and then telling us, in the extension telling you folks as the decision makers, what's the community actually telling us about this particular thing. I would echo Kathy's comments. Their greatest skill, I think, value added, is the ability to facilitate those meetings and draw out of the public the things that are important to them, whether that's through the old-fashioned walk around the room, put dots on things, whether it's other forms of exercises where you get written comments, whether it's the survey, and then they collate all of that information and make it available to us and then by extension to you folks.
And the public through the website.
And the public through the website. And that's the other thing that, where the value added for us during the Clean Water Facility project was that they helped the city populate, well, basically set up the website.
They ran it.
And then kept all of that information going for years in terms of presentations, council actions, key decision-making moments. And in the short conversations that Kathy and I have had, what we see is them doing that same thing for phase 2, but scaled down to the phase 2 size of the project. So I hope that's maybe somewhat helpful for you. And if you need a copy of that Windjammer Park integration plan, I'm sure that we can get one for you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem? Well, wait, did Peter?
No, that's fine. That answers my questions to some degree. I believe that this is significantly scaled down what we require from them, but the price tag is not adequately scaled down. I'm not saying that I'm against Enviro issues. I think they have provided some services for us, but again, the questions that were there last time we approved additional funding for them still remain, and I haven't seen anything concrete enough to say that, yeah, with this scaled down version, we're going to continue to pay at this rate, where I feel it's my fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we are, in fact, getting enough value for our dollars. Have we asked anyone else? Have we asked, is this their first offer to us? These are questions that I would have asked had I known that these ongoing negotiations were taking place. But this week, when I got this back in front of me, was the first I heard of this. The last time I heard of Enviro issues, it was like, this is what we need for environment issues to finish their job. And now apparently you're saying, well, we want them to continue this job, again at a healthy fee that I don't feel is substantiated. But thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Kathy, on the graphics, I remember at Lot, we cited kind of guides you through systems and different things depending on what the subject matter was. They would do those graphics, I mean, the links or whatever, would help set it up.
They won't be doing the graphics that will be in the Interpretive Center, but they will be doing graphics for the public outreach and maybe some ideas for the public to consider during the public scoping.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of it is we have to get examples in front of people before we can actually implement what will happen is with fire issues and Chuck Lennox, if we hire him, they will prepare the package, and we're going to figure out how we're going to procure. I prefer to do it as a design build contract if we can do that legally, but we need to, before we can actually go with that procurement, we need to have some concrete examples so people can give us proposals on. So we do need to, and we also need to get public input on our examples. Are they tacky looking, or are they what people were expecting to see? You have an expectation from a lot of people won't have seen it. Oftentimes you go into these places and it's not impressive. And so we want to make sure that we do something that's successful with the public.
The one, when we were finding out information about the air scrubbers.
Right.
That's what's name we're getting. We went down to Vancouver, and they had a separate site, it was a separate building that they use for educational and weddings and all kinds of things. And, people snicker about that. It was gorgeous. Their grounds were immaculate. It wouldn't hurt maybe even if we don't take a trip down there, lots easier to get to. But even, I would think on the website, to be able to produce some of those pictures when we're deciding kind of what we're going to do. Kind of tail on to Councilman Lars. Since we already have some money in the pile, they don't have to have the money to start work, or do they? Is there any way to, unless it's your world, you don't realize what services are being charged. If there was any way for a company to not bid, but just, on the normal hours of what people get for certain positions. I know that certain jobs we've looked at and we went, smoke,
Yeah.
because we can't conceive that, but I'm not in that world. If there's any way to get any comparable on, I just, we're not in that type of world, so we don't, what looks exorbitant may not be exorbitant at all, just kind of the norm. And I don't know if there's any way, if we could wait to another meeting, because we already have money in that pot. If we don't have to have all of it, or this is, they can't even use that money until we approve the rest of the money. I'm
No,
kind of
that's-
trying to get the
this-
scope to satisfy that when you're not in that world and you're only with nails and screwdrivers or teaching kids, I mean, it's just completely different concept, and just so that we have a better understanding, is it possible?
The work of the previous contract, the amendment we did last fall, is essentially complete. We have a couple of tasks more. So we did complete the clean water facility phase 1 tasks. I have some vital solids marketing and a couple of things I have to do, but we're actually shutting down most of that public information, including the website and everything like that. Now this is starting anew with a new project. We
And
just
new people,
two new
projects with a different team. You
Uh,
said it wouldn't be
would-
necessarily the same people.
it wouldn't be necessarily the same people.
company, so we know what their standards are
Yeah.
and how they complete, I mean,
Yeah, and they know our community.
okay.
So I think that there is value in economies of scale by continuing with enviro issues, because they have worked on Windjammer Park Phase 1, and it's an extension of work that they've already done. With regards to what's before you tonight, this is an amendment to an existing contract. That, and if we want to postpone it, that's fine, that's not a big deal. It will just come back as a brand new contract, because the existing contract expires on August 31st. So we will come back with a brand new contract, and it won't be called amendment 1. It will just be the contract with environmental issues, if that's the way you choose to go.
And it would still combine both projects into
Yes.
one?
But they have to track their time separately,
Right.
because there are two capital
Yes.
projects
Yes,
in
right.
your budget book.
Yes, okay.
And they get billed separately. Got it, Patricia. Got it over to the picture.
So, Councilor Holmberg.
Thank you. I dialed in on what Mr. Larson came up with also on the payment schedule on the proposed contract. And it says that the total price would be $90,400, and then in parentheses it's $68,566. So how do we clean up, if this is going to be the contract extension, the contract extension language is not correct on the payment
We can
schedule.
clarify that. We have not signed the contract, so we can make the amendment and make sure that's in the final signed version.
Okay, then I recognize that it kind of doubles up the workload a little bit if we have a separate contract. I would like to know more about the deliverables on this thing too. And that's the way I'm going to vote, not to stagnate our progress. But there's some details that I think I would like to see in this.
So if you could maybe just shoot us an email with those specifics, so we're sure to address them.
Councilor Shabidi.
So, with all due respect, I'm hearing what you're saying. We don't have a motion yet, but that may be work that doesn't need to be done if this passes, correct?
If the recommended action passes?
Right. Right, I mean, so the contract expires, and I guess was the lesson we learned here, the contract expires in 3 days, 4 days?
Yeah.
So can we work on that? 2 days?
Yeah, that's, we forgot about the date, so we were actually going to present this in workshop so we can give you more information prior to making the decision, and the expiration date kind of jumped up on us, and so we moved it up, and I do apologize for that.
It's just a matter of the form,
Yeah.
a new contract versus an amendment.
And so, I mean, I do appreciate what Council Members Almberg and Larson are saying. I would still vote to support it. I'm familiar with these guys. I appreciate the economy of scale and everything else they're doing to keep things rolling. I've been talking to a lot of people about phase 2, so I want to keep that fast track, keep the momentum going, keep people excited for the success of the park. I don't know if bringing it back, hopefully that would get any questions on deliverables or any other concerns, but I'm happy to move with the amended language or make that adjustment in the recommended action to have the contract just amended to correct that language. I'm not making that motion, but I would support that.
Councilor Hudson.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Servadius. I understand the urgency because of the expiring contract, and it's no secret that I'm a fan of Enviro issues. I think that they've handled themselves in the project and us really well. So I do support this, but in terms of approving a contract tonight, like Councilmember Larson pointed out, there's 3 different dollar amounts on the one that we're looking at. And since this is a contract, I would prefer an amended version with whatever the real amount is, whether it's $68,566 or $90,400 or $68,730. So if we're going to pass this as is tonight, we definitely need to clean that up. So Joel, I would definitely support that motion. And I agree with Councilmember Allenberg, since this covers 2 totally separate projects. Just for future reference, I would like to see 2 contracts because the deliverables are going to be unique. Having said that, since we need to get this moved through quickly, I would settle for more details after the fact. If I didn't know the folks at Enviro issues, I would want to wait, but knowing them and the quality of their work, then I'd be comfortable moving forward with the joint contract. But yeah, in the future, I would like a more level of detail.
We set the original contract up last time as an on-call contract, so we'd have the flexibility to add tasks.
Councilor Holmberg.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, we have approved contract extensions with that increase in money on several contracts. Why can't we approve a contract time extension right now that gives us, let's say, 30 days, 60 days to be able to vet out these issues that we have and still go with the amendment?
No, I still got it.
Then I'm completely fine with that. If there's still original scope left to be completed.
If there's some minor things that need to be cleaned up in this document. So with that, I'd make a motion that we extend this amendment, this contract, to say 60 days. If you can do it earlier than that, we do it earlier than that. And no cost increase at this time.
Motion to extend.
Extend the
for
contract 60 days.
And no.
And then come back with a clean contract amendment.
So we have a second. A motion and a second. Yes.
I'm thinking what we might want to do when we come back is have 2 amendments. One for Windjammer phase 2 and one specific to the Interpretive Center, which kind of clears up what Councilmember Heisler was talking about.
Add that to my motion.
Just do that on their own.
Yeah, we'll just do that on our own.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't
I
need,
heard what Councilmember
Okay.
you don't need it in the
Heisler
motion then, right?
said. Just to extend.
Just
Extend
a
it.
motion to extend 60.
60 days, but you know, you can come in earlier than that.
So we have a motion and a second to extend the contract for 60 days. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. I have been reminded that on action items, I will open it up to the public. And I guess I didn't feel the need to on this amendment, but I will on the next 2. Okay, so do we want to move on to B at this point?
Ready.
Okay. Action item, professional service agreement limits, insights, Clean Water Facility Interpretive
So it's
Center.
just to take a look at and pass around.
We're passing around the previous report that we did it's almost 2 years ago,
Yeah, from Chuck Lennon.
just to give you an idea of our past work on
Yeah,
this.
it's just, there's one going on each side, so just if you want to take a glance at it and pass it on
And
down.
get you a copy if you want.
Chuck came and presented this at a council workshop about 2.5 years ago. I think
No, it was fall of 17.
Yeah.
It's been 2 years. Okay, this is a proposed professional service agreement for Lennox Insights. That's for our Clean Water Facility Interpretive Center. Right now we're calling it Interpretive Center. This document I'm passing around, I actually called it a Water Center, but I think it's probably going to need to have a different name because we'll be doing other programs, but we'll talk more about it. In summary, we construct the space in the Clean Water Facility as an educational facility. We have been calling it the Interpretive Center. It's the room out with the big windows. The facility is intended to support the city's environmental activities such as wastewater, drinking water, stormwater, archaeology, and solid waste. These are all programs that we're very active in, and most of them have legally mandated educational requirements. So we wanted to consolidate some of these programs into one facility. As we said, we want to develop this environmental message, and it requires a specific type of consultant that kind of has knowledge of signage, displays, and methods of engaging the public. And we've kind of, that report here kind of talks a little bit about that. And while we have the space available, providing the actual educational displays was budgeted after completion of the Clean Water Facility. We just didn't have the time, or it was with the construction going on, it was something we want to take afterwards. And the budgeting for that is coming out of various funds: water, solid waste, wastewater, a couple of the stormwater funds. So anyway, so this is moving forward with that. It was budgeted over 2 years. Chuck Lennox of Lennox Insight worked as a subcontractor during the design of the Clean Water Facility. We did do an initial master plan, which I'm passed around. He helped provide with that. Provided insights to the consulting, to the architectural team on types and extent of education materials. So as we laid out the facility, we made sure we had the infrastructure and the facility laid out so it would meet that purpose. And I think that was quite successful. We did do the plan and present it in a workshop. This plan described the message in audiences, how to convey the messages, and the potential ways to implement the facilities. These are specialized displays, and we may have to design and bid them, or I'm hoping to do a design bid contract. But what those displays are and how we move them forward is what we're going to be doing in this first phase of work. Now the space is available, we want to start the process and utilize Chuck Lennox in implementing the interpretive plan. His scope of services will be to assist staff and environmental issues in determining the public messages and audiences for the Interpretive Center. You've heard me talk a lot about wastewater over the years, and we want to be sure to get somebody that can do it a lot more simply than me. We want to assist staff with developing different type of displays for the education facility. Do we want to go with static displays? A lot of people are going digital because they can be changed a lot. Sometimes you buy these static displays, they're pretty expensive and they last 5 years and they're obsolete. So a lot of people are moving into digital displays for that. He'll assist with developing the graphics and display concepts. Chuck is not a graphic artist. He's of course very visual and knows this stuff really well, but we do need a graphic artist to help us with that. That's what we want to use environmental issues for. We want to assist staff in obtaining public input on the education center. Again, he'd be part of the team as we work this through the public, and assist staff with developing initial concept and procurement product. Like I said, I'd like to do a design build where we bring on a specialist with this type of stuff, but how we do that and how we procure it is still up in the air. Anyway, this is a first phase of probably be amended in the future. We do recommend that City Council authorize the mayor to sign a professional services agreement with Lennox Insights in the amount of $21,800.
And can I just add something? I believe that Chuck will bring tremendous value to us. We have staff that has so much knowledge about their specific topics, and they want to share all of that. And we really need some help, and Chuck will bring this because he does interpretive features and displays all over the world. I can't just turn the staff loose because we will have tiny font on a huge billboard because they have so much information that they want to share. And so I think Chuck can help us bring that information down so that it's appealable to the public, they like it, and then have a way for them if they want more information. Like I think they're called those QR codes or whatever, how we tie all that in so people can then go to another site and get additional information. We saw some displays at Brightwater that the staff did versus the someone who does this professionally, and there's a huge difference in how it looks, how it feels, and how it draws people's attention and interest. So that's what I think Chuck will bring to us.
Okay, I guess before we discuss it here, I'll ask if the audience has any input or questions. Anybody here? Okay. Seeing none, we will bring it back to the table. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I think you hit the nail on the head. Is some people have the gift to take all that information and to put it into a certain wording, format, language that different ages can understand and grasp. If it's too high, then you're going to lose interest. But we also know we're going to have a lot of school kids, but also kids in high school. So there is an art to definitely, and it's worth your money to hire someone that can zero in on exactly how to present it, but what language to use to catch people's attention, to make them want to learn more or keep going to think. The other thing that interests me is on there was the archaeology. Kelly was going to work with to see if we could borrow some of that, and that may not be something that he could do, but is that still in the works, hopefully?
It's
to
still,
be
it's still under
able
discussion. And
Okay.
and remember, our MOA does require us to, when we're finished with the project, we're doing the final closeout of the archaeology, to provide public education on our work down at Windjammer. So that's why we have it up there, is because it'll fulfill one of those legal requirements also.
So there are several different topics, and so of course we have a requirement, a legal requirement to provide public education on water conservation. So some of the funding for this is coming from the water fund, and we will have water conservation and water cycle information in this. So we've got somebody from the water department that's going to be sitting on this team. We have a requirement for fats, oil, and grease, reduction in our wastewater collection system, as well as we want to provide information on the new clean water facility and that technology. So there's some wastewater funds, and we will have wastewater staff on the team. We have a public education requirement through our stormwater permit. So we've got someone from stormwater that will be on the team. Solid waste, we have a requirement to promote reduce, reuse, and recycle, possibly composting. So we've got solid waste money in this, and a solid waste member on the team. As Brett mentioned, we have a requirement to educate about cultural resources. That money is coming out of REIT. And then the other one that we want to have some educational materials on is the Gary Oaks. So we've got that Gary Oak wood. We've talked about having some furniture designed for that center out of the Gary Oak, plus educational materials and information regarding Gary Oaks and our city heritage and how that all relates. So that's kind of the background, and we'll have staff members from all those different groups sitting on this team along, we hope, with 1 or 2 council members, and Chuck and Enviro Issues working on that. Oh,
And the
and somebody
money's-
from Development Services too.
And the money's there, and we have tasks that we have to fulfill to be sure we hit, kind of when we had Mary Beth Crandall. We didn't have anyone on staff that was available that did that, and she took it to the farmer's market and things like that, so, okay,
So we do have $925,000 in this year's budget.
okay, thank you.
Councilor Wassinger.
Yes, you also piqued my thought that the school district is so big into recycling and composting, so it may be worth it to have someone participate a little bit from the school district. I mean, they're just such experts. I can't even tell you, my kids, they're experts, way more than I ever was. But a lot of this in the, I like this, that to have an expert help with this important job, if you will, for the wastewater treatment plant and finishing up the Interpretive Center. And I support it 100%, but I do see a lot of it is working with the Enviro issues, and since we're gonna wait and get more info, would it make sense to wait to approve this along with Enviro issues? I mean, a lot of this work and tasks are maybe sort of hingent upon Enviro issues participating too, which I assume that they will, but it seems like a lot of it is tasks having to do with working with them as well.
Well, it's also working with us. A big part of the issue is, like Kathy said, we have to bring this mass of knowledge and not only condense it, but condense it in a fashion that people can understand. So I would say that if we move forward with Chuck, we're still going to need some expertise in that site. So whether it's Enviro issues or with somebody else, that's, to me, that's what he has to do.
Okay.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. So this, I believe, is approved expenditure. There's a specific skill set identified, there's a solid scope of services, and there's a task list which breaks things down that we see we're getting our value for our dollar spent. Leading working group meetings, we're getting project management and oversight, and there are deliverables here. I support this, and even though it seems like it was a foregone conclusion that Enviro issues is going to continue because they are enumerated throughout here as working with Chuck, I would say that I would recommend moving forward with this, and whether Enviro issues has a diminished capacity or no capacity moving forward, I believe that this is something that we are going to get value from and that we should move forward with. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Servetus.
I really second Councilman Larson's comments. The only thing I'm wondering about, got a short-term contract expiring here in January 31st, 2020. We don't have any payment. There's no not to exceed amount.
That's in the contract language.
So, in the contract language.
So you have the scope of work with the cost estimate, and in the contract itself, we have a not to exceed.
I can show you what I'm looking at. It says it's a bunch of zeros and X's.
Yeah.
Sure,
18 of 84.
4.1A.
Page 5 of the contract, 18.
That's right. Page 5 of the contract.
That should be the point of that.
Yeah.
Right there.
The amount is stated in the scope of work.
So we can just we can fill that in, have Chuck initial it before the mayor signs it.
It's a scripter error, isn't it? It's a scripter error.
Scrivener's error, yeah, it can easily be corrected.
And we did have a specific cost estimate attached to it.
So the figure will be 21.8. That's the
Yes,
amount on it.
yes.
Yeah.
Not to exceed, to exceed.
Councilor Larson.
Sorry, I had one other question. just on the contract. I had highlighted this and I skipped over it. I was so sorry about saying something positive. On page 3, number 4 at the top, there's a cross-out. The consultant's errors and omissions liability of $1 million per occurrence. And I was just wondering why that was crossed out, if it was part of the standardized contract.
That's our standard consultant language, and what we're doing here doesn't require errors and omission insurance. So like an engineer or an architect, there's potential for something to fall down or not work. Here, he's such a small contractor, frankly, the errors and omission insurance would cost as much as his fee. And so there's no risk to us on this, so we just deleted that requirement.
And if there are no further questions or comments, I move that we authorize the mayor to sign a professional services agreement with Lennox Institutes Incorporated in the amount of $21,800.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second that reads pretty much like the recommended action. Seeing no other questions or input, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Okay, next item is under action items. Next and last is a moratorium restricting development in the central business district. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
I believe this is my question.
Okay.
It became apparent that there are different interpretations or whatever, or loopholes in our approving or not approvingly high. And I know that once you put in an application, then those are the rules you get to follow. And I do not want this loophole to happen again. To me, Central Business District still is Central Business District. It has to do with our economy, and now we have 3 lots that are residential. And I think that hurts our downtown. It's very small. We don't live in a big urban city that can go to all housing. I like the idea of how we had done it, that there is retail on the bottom with allowable offices or housing on top of that, but not that the whole project, mixed use. Well, apparently we have to have a ratio for that. I didn't know that. Mixed use to me is common sense. It's not, 40,000 square feet to 1 or 2%. To me, that's not mixed use. That's just barely a check in the box. And I think before we get it destroyed, it just happens very quickly. Someone else will put in another thing. Councilman Heisman made some comments about that, and Councilman Wiesner, and I know I did, that if we don't have it written right, I thought we did for Central Business, but obviously we don't, that we need to put a stop and get it right, because we should have a vision of what our downtown is going to look like and how we want economic development to grow. And apparently we must not, because staff seems to think it's one way, different council members see it as other ways. It was a fantastic project. Lehigh is fantastic and well needed. I just think it's still in the wrong place, but it was a vote. I need to make it work, but I want to make sure what else goes into Central Business District fits Central Business District. And that's why I am proposing that there be some type of moratorium where it's a full, half, whatever. But there is so little. We're still working on guidelines that we haven't seen from Main Street, and there were some wonderful ideas in that, but we haven't seen it. So if they're not in place, someone puts in a plan, then that's not even considered. So anyway, this is the reason why I asked that it be on this workshop, because I think it's imperative that it take action and not wait 2 months down the road, because we could have 4 projects applied by then. If we need to know what we want, what our vision is, and if there's loopholes on how it's written, then we need to get them straightened out. And whatever the council votes, that's fine. We are a group, and once a decision is made, we need to work just like the wastewater treatment plant, make it work, tweak it, and get it to be the best it can be. But I just think it did not quite work on the last project. So I'd love to hear from my other council members if you think it's the right idea or not, but I just think that there's a time issue. We can't wait 2 or 3 or 4 months down the road. Staff, yes, has a lot, but what is our priority and what are we going to save or what is our vision. So that's it. Thank you.
Councilor Larson?
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, we'll see if the public,
Oh, that's
anyone here
right.
from the
Sorry.
public,
I don't ask that, you do.
has any
Sorry.
input about this discussion. Yes. Wanna come up? Sure.
My name is Dan Evans, Main Street Board President. I would just like to say that I highly support a moratorium on the downtown so we can get our code figured out. Part of the problem that we have is we don't even know where we're going with our downtown as a city as a whole, 5, 10, 20 years from now. And we have to get that in place so that way we can have the code that represents that. Right now it's kind of a hope and a dream, and I hope you guys support it. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Larson?
Thank you again, Mayor. So I agree with just about everything that Mayor Pro Tem said. We definitely found out during this process that we have issues in our code. We have things that need to be clarified, and there's work to be done. I also agree that under the current code, we don't want to have this happen again. So a moratorium seems, on the face of it, like the way to go forward. What I do want to just ensure is that enacting a moratorium, in the process of that, I don't want to dissuade growth. I don't want to dissuade projects that wouldn't be a problem similar to the ones that we just had. So I want to know what the moratorium is actually going to stop, what it's going to hinder, and what I don't want as a city is to put out a message that says, hey, developers, we don't want you here for a while. We still want growth. We want to manage it properly, and that's what addressing our code is about. We want to put on the brakes to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and that makes perfect sense. But what I don't want is I don't want the collateral damage to be the possible building of projects that we would easily approve of and that would fit the developing vision for downtown. So I would just like to see that addressed, but I'm all for a moratorium at this point.
Councilor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor. I am somewhat resistant to moratoriums without them being specific about what is the goal and what is the timeline and the why has to be defined. Moratoriums can actually be very restrictive and unplanned things can happen, unintended consequences happen. I've been in this community working for about, I guess, before I retired, 40 plus years in the construction development business. And during that time, the only projects that have developed down in this district are the condominiums on the waterfront, remodels of different types in existing buildings, and Frasers. And there's a reason why we don't have a lot of development downtown. The economy has changed for a lot of reasons. The small shops, not just in Oak Harbor, but throughout the country, go to other centers, online sources for shopping. There's a lot of vacancies in the brick-and-mortar stores, at the shopping centers. Just walk through Cascade Mall. Why is that happening? What has transitioned is that the communities that have survived and doing well because they are highly dependent on the neighborhood, people who live in their neighborhood. It's a walking community. And one of the reasons why development hasn't happened here in our area is because people are required, developers are required to have this so-called commercial space on the first floor. Well, that's not a bad concept, but does it work economically? And the answer is no. And the reason it doesn't is because you cannot produce vacant space on the first floor and expect people to, you can't produce
space on the first floor, expect people to rent it for $2 a square foot. Small shops aren't going to do it. You have to charge that on a new construction in order to justify putting that space. I have looked at properties, vacant properties, and have done the due diligence on them, and have decided not to do the projects down there for that very reason, because I wouldn't, and I know other people would not take on that risk of developing empty space or low rent space when you have to charge $2 a foot, when you can only charge in this economy 50 cents to $1 a square foot. It isn't going to happen. So if you don't want development in your downtown, in my opinion, just keep that condition of building commercial space on the first floor and wait to see what happens. It will be the unintended consequences, because when you look back 30 and 40 years, really nothing has happened down there, and the reason is nobody wants to pay $2 a square foot to be down there, or whatever the rate was at that time. And if we keep doing the same thing over and over, I guess that's the definition of insanity, because you're expecting new results, doing the same thing over and over. So it's a different point of view. I will probably support Beth's motion for a moratorium so we can have the discussion and the debate. But there are definitely red flags out there by just saying we're going to arbitrarily have this percentage of mixed use, and it's all going to be on the first floor. On your moratorium, maybe you want to take a look at the legality of restricting development in existing buildings to restoration, and new properties may be allowed to have residential on the first floor level. There's other combinations to this, but just to throw it out there and say, well, we want to have a percentage of commercial on the first floor and it has to be on the front street, that's probably a recipe for nothing's ever going to happen in our life. Thank you.
Councilor Isaac.
Thank you, Mayor. Several things. First of which is the MRSC addresses this, and I just sent everybody a link to that question in your email. First, a couple of comments. Having researched this issue, for a couple months now, there's almost an infinite number of combinations of moratoriums that we could pass, whether it's a time period or just certain uses. It's something that really would take an entire meeting to hash out the details. I think to just pass a generic moratorium for a generic amount of time wouldn't really suit our purposes. We need to be intentional about the things that we're doing. So I'm wondering if that's something for the Planning Commission to take up. And on that note, I'm wondering if Steve can give us an update on what kind of conversations are already taking place on the Planning Commission, et cetera, or development services. And if this were something that we were to decide on and pass tonight, do you know of any applications that are on the horizon? Not necessarily that have already been submitted, but it might be happening.
So before I respond to your questions, I think Mr. Oberon has something he wants to say.
Sure.
I think to answer your question, there's a myriad of options. I was asked to have 3 options prepared, and I think that'll narrow the framework down, and I think it'll answer the question and provide a good lead-in for the discussion there. So let's go ahead and pass this around, and it'll answer, and certainly I appreciate Steve Powers and Nikki Esparza being here to help me with this presentation, because some of the technical stuff they know a lot better than I do. So just to kind of lay through, divide it up into 3 options, and kind of one no change, which is no moratorium, but we want to call recognition to the current consideration of Main Street recommendations. They provided us some very detailed design guidelines for the central business district. It kind of morphed into, some of them were design and some of them have ended up to be ordinance changes. We just
talked to it, we just spent some time on that yesterday, so some of us are 2 nights in a row. That was the second time that the Plan Commission had discussed that issue. They will continue to work it through. So the good thing is that they've already kind of started the process of looking at our ordinance, and they provided us some good framework and good recommendations. So we're kind of already proactive in answering some of the questions of really taking a look at our existing ordinances and seeing what changes we want to move forward with. So option 2 is the full moratorium. So, and then I kind of gave you the cons there is at least one project that's answered the question there when I asked Steve about it, that's in the preliminary review that would be affected if we did a across the board blanket moratorium. So, and then also we have the promotion of the Opportunity Zone, which is a federal tax program. It has a time frame on it. So if you're doing a moratorium that's especially blanket, you're kind of taking away the clock on that moratorium. That's 2/3 of the downtown is in that Opportunity Zone. And then just to kind of paraphrase what Councilmember Almberg mentioned is it could be possibly viewed as potentially negative to developers if doing a blanket one. So the pro certainly is by having a blanket one, you don't have anything slip through because you're just slowing all the process down and let option 1 continue too. We kind of came up with a hybrid, which is option 3, which is a partial moratorium restricting development of downtown. Its focus on the 2 primary issues is the residential, going into prohibiting residential in the downtown, and then it temporarily draws a 33% mixed use definition there. So this would allow the current project to continue through, and other projects that were in that realm with just a commercial on the ground floor could condition through. I mean, some of the cons with it, there's something that maybe you don't want that could sneak through if you did this moratorium. But I think it's a softer message, and it allows it to things to continue through. Some of the projects that are more likely to be more favorable once we go through this process of amending our code that would likely be in there. So with that, I think Nikki and Steve are here to provide you even more detail on the process if you have questions.
So to go to Ms. Heisen's questions, yes, there's currently a project underway with the Planning Commission. As you've heard several times, its origins were with a document that Main Street produced and forwarded to us and said that they'd like the city to consider adopting it. As we spent time with that document looking at it, we realized there were really 2 different big things going on in there. One was really clearly designed guideline kinds of language and concepts and vision. Another was really more focused on things that we think of more being in the code, zoning, uses, those kinds of things. And so our work with the Planning Commission has said that we really should break those into 2 separate projects, and that's what we have tracking right now, are 2 separate projects with the Planning Commission. One, the design guideline one, is a little bit ahead of the code review one, but they're both moving forward simultaneously. Just as a quick aside, I do think it's important for the council to maybe remember or to recall that you are not without a vision for your downtown. You have a comprehensive plan that describes that vision to you. You have a zoning code that is intended to help you and the community achieve that vision. Can it be amended? Absolutely. Can it be refined? Sure. Is it appropriate to look at something after a certain period of time and say to yourselves as a community, maybe we're not achieving what we want to achieve? Communities all over the nation do that. And there's lots of literature out there on this very specific topic itself, the inclusion of retail as part of mixed use. Does it work? Does it not? I mean, there's a lot of conversation out there in the planning world about that. So I guess my big point is that you actually have a foundation on which things can be built from, but we can certainly change that foundation as well. We're working with one particular applicant right now. It's not at the point where it's a formal application, We've done what we call a pre-application, so that's sort of the initial conversations. They've come back to us a couple of different times with some refinements of that concept. The difficult thing for me is if Ms. Munns was to say to me, well, when do you think they're going to submit that application? I couldn't possibly answer that question because we never know when somebody will choose to submit, or will they continue on that path, right? But we did want you to be aware that there is something out there that has, as presently proposed, retail on 2 floors and the residential on 2 floors above that. So we don't want to, our staff's opinion would be that you don't want to foreclose that possibility. If for some reason they are 3 weeks away from making a formal submittal to us, it would be truly unfortunate to have a moratorium that would prevent them from submitting that application. And that's the sort of the partial moratorium that Blaine mentioned in option number 3 down here. With that, I hope I hit all of your questions, but I'll be happy to help you.
Yes, thank you. That was all my questions. Thank you. And just want to confirm the option number 3, it gives us the moratorium guidelines that would not restrict or impede the existing preliminary project, because that is exactly what I'm on the board.
It's possible that we drafted option 3 with that in mind.
Okay, just theoretically. It's highly possible. Yes, it's good. It's very high.
Councilor Survey.
Thank you. I spent the weekend, my son had a sailing race, so I was down in Seattle in the neighborhoods of Ballard, Fremont, and Wallingford. If you haven't been down in a while, it's unbelievable how much they've changed. And obviously we don't have that population base, but you take any of those little neighborhoods and they are predominantly, almost exclusively, retail on the first floor, residential above it, or residential really right behind it. If you look at those main streets, what was probably a couple of homes is now very dense, multifamily apartments. And I've always envisioned our downtown as an arts and entertainment district. It's not that big, but if you want to go have nightlife, arts, entertainment, eat, that's where you go. And I think it's important that every community has a very designated space. I think it's very important that Main Street has a voice. I spent some time on that board, but they have a voice in what that vision looks like because they represent all of the merchants down there. So I think it can work. Is it Oak Harbor's time? I don't know. I do support probably the option 3 there. I expressed how I felt about the current application we have going forward. And I think that our ordinance is I'll use the word again, very much manipulated to put a residential project in an area that should be commercial. This option 3 doesn't allow that. It still contains no residential on the first floor, and then we throw in the ratio for some mixed use of up to 33%. I don't know if that's the right ratio, but it sounds like it at least would work with this. Maybe it's a Nikki question. If we put any form of moratorium in the works today, in 30 days, could we lift that moratorium
Yes, you could.
or amend it?
Absolutely. So if you pass an ordinance tonight, staff's proposal is that you hold a public hearing. You have to hold a public hearing within 60 days. So if you held a public hearing, say in October, and you got a lot of public comment that said, we don't like this, we're not in support of this, and you decided that you wanted to end the moratorium, you could absolutely do that.
Okay. And reflecting on Councilmember Ballmer's work history, I do believe that there's probably not a ton of projects. There's not a ton of properties, everything. I don't think there's a lot of, we have some property in CBD, CBD1 and CBD2, but there's not a lot of, you see there hasn't been a lot of development. There also isn't a ton of easy property left down there. So I don't know that it's the residential that's purposefully restricted that or unintentionally restricted that. So I guess I'll just pause there, but I would support probably putting option 3 in effect, knowing that if we have a public hearing, then amend or lift it.
Councilor Watson.
I would prefer option 3. And would this affect, Joel mentioned CBD1 and CBD2, and I also mentioned that in our last meeting. Would this affect moratorium affect any of the CBD1 or 2 if there was an application that was primary residential where that's allowed with this?
As currently drafted, it would, because it refers to the CBD, and it refers to the specific code sections. So 192300 through 330 covers Central Business District as well as the Central Business District 1 and 2. So currently would preclude anything from happening in those other districts. Tim, it might be a good idea to pull that up, if you could, please. I wasn't sure whether we would need them, but I put together 2 quick exhibits just so that we could all visualize the area that we're talking about. Obviously, the red outline is what's identified as a central business district from our zoning perspective, as well as from our comprehensive plan perspectives. Then this slide, I apologize, it's a little cut off on the bottom there, gives you the breakdown of the zoning. The red area is the straight central business district, or plain if you want to use that label. The 2 yellow areas are the CBD1, and then the blue is the CBD2. Mr. Servatius is correct that there aren't a ton of vacant properties, frankly, within the entire district. There are fewer vacant properties inside of the plain CBD. There's a little more vacant land in the CBD1 or CBD2, or better way to say it, maybe vacant or underutilized. So that's the breadth of the area that you would be dealing with as it's currently drafted.
The moratorium.
Yes.
What would the timeline be on the moratorium? Are we talking, I don't know what the standard.
We only get 6 months initially.
6 months is what this would say.
And then we're allowed to, under the law, to extend it for up to an additional 6 months, but the council has to conduct a new hearing. And I think you have to adopt new findings of fact, and you also have to adopt a work plan that says how we as a community are going to use that additional 6 months time. Because the balance there, of course, is you just can't have what they call a rolling moratorium, which then eventually becomes a prohibition on something.
No, that's not, wouldn't want to be my intention at all. Yes, I support option 3.
Councilor Larson?
Thank you, Mayor. Looking at these again for the first time, I know we're meeting again next Tuesday. Just for the record, I'd like to see a little bit more advance notice on some of these major issues that we're being asked to take action on as we have tonight. But option 2 is basically a full stop, whereas option 3 is a pause and reflect, which I think is what we need to do. I don't believe we need to have any just reaction and put an all stop on everything. Our job, and truly in our documents, it says we are to preserve and develop. We have an economic development plan. So preserve our town and our city and what we have, but also we still have to be able to move forward. And I think option 3 provides for both of those directives that we have. So I would support option 3 moving forward.
So the time frame is at your discretion. We just were ready because there was some direction from the council to be ready, but certainly that's your prerogative and it's your policy decision on how you want to move forward.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Ross, it was my urgency that I requested quickly to have something in place because I have seen in other areas in the county, and we had a moratorium when someone wanted to put in a gentleman's club, and we had nothing on the books. And we wanted to be very careful. In your neighborhood. Also with the marijuana. We didn't know how the state was going to rule with the medical. We were hoping that they would have combined. But Marjorie Height came in here and we had a full moratorium just to see how it was shaping in other areas. We also didn't want to shortchange the law enforcement to not hopefully get some of that money to help with what they were going to be requested to monitor and arrest and this and that. So it was mine. It's on me, not the staff. I pushed them and I really appreciate it very, very much. I know you probably hated me last night at midnight or 11 p.m., but thank you. But I just felt like I have seen things slip through the cracks, and I just felt it was urgent that we do it. So it's on me. Question, Mr. Powers.
Yes.
So the third option says CBD, and you said that CBD 1 and 2 would also be affected or not, because it's not CBD? Oh, she's got some,
Yes, so the ordinance.
because I can't see.
The ordinance is drafted, the second whereas statement. I'll pause for the council there. The second whereas statement, whereas Oak Harbor Municipal Code Chapter 1920, 300 through 330 contains zoning regulations pertaining to the central business district. So as drafted right there, that whereas, and then I think in the body of the ordinance itself, we would have a moratorium on all of the central business district area, because 1 and 2 are just technically sub-districts of the central business district. It's a nuance, but it's an important technical nuance.
But we could rescind the moratorium earlier, if it was decided. The other thing is on the guidelines and the code that the planning commission's doing, how much longer is that going to be? I mean, I know they're deliberating, but you kind of get a hint if it's going to be several more meetings for planning commission, or maybe just one more before we get it.
I think that it's really reasonable to expect, well, first off, we'd be happy to provide a more detailed briefing at a workshop as well. But I think it's reasonable to expect that the design guidelines will probably come out of the commission, I would say, in October. I would imagine at the outside for the guidelines. The code part is by design was a little bit behind that. So that's going to take just a touch longer time. Because we think it's important, and the Planning Commission seemed to agree last night as we were having the conversation, that we need to have a public process on the code, perhaps, some robust outreach to the community, because it's the community's downtown, right? And we want to make sure that we open up that opportunity for comments, particularly because we do occasionally get questions which aren't related to the topic this evening, but come about like, should we have this kind of use A, B, C in the downtown or not? Or do we have too many of those things, right? And so there are a lot of things on the use side that aren't part of this particular conversation. So I think that's going to take a little while to go through that process. I'd be happy to have a more structured briefing for you at the September workshop. We could add that to the topic. I think I already have 3 or 4 things on, so another one wouldn't be a problem at all.
He says it with a big smile and he's kicking himself under the table.
No. I do
this
think
would be temporary for 6 months. So within 6 months, we ought to get some of those things decided and approved as far as the guidelines and some of the codes that are being looked at and rewritten to be considered. If I'm not mistaken, hearing what you're saying and where the planning commission is at this point, adding the public hearing within that. So I'm just.
So I think I'm safe to say that Ms. Esparza would prefer for us to complete that work inside of 6 months, because not extending a moratorium, and I'm assuming she's nodding yes, that not extending the moratorium is the better course of action. That will mean a slight shift in our resources and development services in order to make that happen. Just sort of fair disclosure on that.
We wouldn't have as many applications coming in.
I wish that we had lots of applications coming in the downtown.
I do too.
Unfortunately, that's not the case. But fortunately for us, there are residential applications happening elsewhere in the community, so that's a good thing. The guidelines they're not subject to this moratorium because they're not actually part of the code, right? And so the moratorium applies to applications. It doesn't apply to the guidelines. So that project will continue just full steam, just as it is right now.
Pondering. I think I have an idea where this property is, and guidelines may not affect this one property. It would definitely affect the meet between Pioneer Way and Bayshore. If I remember how Main Street had submitted those and their ideas that were pretty darn, I mean, good.
So maybe just by way of a little bit of background, and it was actually last night's Planning Commission presentation that Ray Lindenberg is heading this project up for us, did an excellent job. One of the things he reminded the Planning Commission of is that a good number of the suggestions and recommendations from Main Street in their document are actually already in our existing design guidelines. Where we see the ability to take what they've done and bolster what we have is inside the neighborhood-specific section in our design guidelines. So basic things like building location, parking location, all of those kinds of things, utilities, pedestrian-oriented scale, all of that is already in our existing design guidelines, and those work really well. Where we're taking this project is to say Main Street has some very specific recommendations for design features inside of those in the downtown. And that's where we can enhance that existing design guideline document. It already had a section devoted to the downtown. What we're doing is sort of making that 2.0 by folding in Main Street's recommendations into that area. So again, I want to go back to this idea for the council that you have a lot of things in place right now that do provide you more than just a little bit of a foundation. So that project, I would expect the Planning Commission could conduct their hearing in September on the guidelines. If they are comfortable making a recommendation to the council, we can be to you in October. If they're not comfortable, that's why I gave you the October date, or they need some additional information, we'll get it out probably in October, which means we could be to you with the guidelines in November. In the meantime, we will brief you at a workshop.
I'm done.
Okay, Councilor Plummer.
I have a question for Ms. Clark. Thank you. You know, when I read this option 3, and we're identifying the preliminary review process to continue, allowing the preliminary process to continue, are we adopting or are we adapting this code that is specifically for an applicant?
I'm not sure that I fully understand.
Well,
Are we,
I do, but go ahead.
Either one of you answer it. It sounds to me
so are you
like
saying,
it's
are we
being-
passing
are we
this in order
crafting
to?
this option 3 that protects an application that's
No.
already in process?
No,
No.
because we don't actually have we don't have a formal application. But what we're suggesting to the council is that you probably don't want to enact a full moratorium that would potentially preclude that application from being accepted by staff because it meets the conversation that you and the community have been having. It has full retail on the ground floor. It actually has a second floor of retail. And so
it's in compliance with the existing orders.
Yes. And so what we did when we were choosing the language for this moratorium is listen to the concerns that you had, which was ground floor residential and establishing, no, that was not a concern?
The way you worded it, I was just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
that was the concern.
That was
Yes,
the concern.
Yes. So the ground floor residential and then the issue of mixed use development and what truly constituted mixed use development. The 33% actually came from a conversation that Steve and I had, and Steve's thought was, well, if you take a 3-story building, then the bottom of that 3-story building is 1/3 of the total square footage, right? And so that number just came from that
Okay, so
conversation.
that number is not, it cannot be identified with
No.
even a preliminary.
It's the preliminary application is a higher percentage.
It's actually a higher percentage than that, but it's intended to allow that application to go forward, should it come forward in this 6-month window.
Okay,
Because we want to be sensitive to, I think, what Mr. Larson was saying, which is you don't want to stop development that you believe meets the appropriate.
and I didn't want to have the city challenged
No.
that we have crafted an ordinance for a specific project.
No, I think the intent of sharing that information was to say that, hey, we do have this out there on the horizon, and we want you to be aware of that as you're considering a moratorium.
The conversation continues.
So do we, so you mentioned we have to have a public hearing, so.
In 60 days. So,
60
in 60 days?
Oh, we don't have, I thought we had to have,
No,
like,
so-
to pass the,
No.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
So moratoriums are generally passed in emergency type situations, right? And you pass them without a public hearing
Okay, so we can do
oftentimes.
that.
And then the public hearing is set within 60 days. And
Okay.
this ordinance actually sets a date for a public hearing of October 1st at
Okay.
6 o'clock.
So we can pass this ordinance right now?
You
the
can,
one
and
we
it is
have.
effective immediately.
That's nicely drafted for us. Okay, I would support that, thank you.
Councilor Surveys?
Does anyone need any more time to review the ordinance? I move to adopt ordinance number 1883, instituting a partial moratorium restricting development in the central business district.
Okay, got a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 1883.
Further discussion,
I'm sorry?
further discussion. I have.
Yes.
There's no impact on our action by regarding that legal project.
No, sir, that project is vested.
Okay.
So, we have a question?
Adopting ordinance 1883, instituting a partial moratorium restricting development in the central business district.
Yes, so just the first sentence of option 3.
Okay.
We had a
So-
second, didn't we?
Yes, we have a motion and a second. Any other input or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. That will conclude our action items for this meeting. We will move on to non-action items. Human Resources, A, Notice Salary Commission Report and Order. And I think we have our Human Resource Director, Emma House, joining us.
Good afternoon, evening, council and mayor. Emma House, Human Resources Director, and I am here to report as your city staff member who has been assisting your salary commission. I have Hal Hovey here with me today. He is the chair of our salary commission. In your packet, you will notice that we are coming forward with the report and order from your salary commission. The salary commission, I'll go ahead and actually just read the little blurb of history to give us all a good understanding. The salary commission is set to determine the appropriate compensation levels for our council members and the mayor. By virtue of Ordinance 1429, which was passed June 30th of 2005, and then subsequently amended by Ordinance number 1806, which was passed July 5th, 2017. It took us some time to get the salary commission staffed, and then we began meeting in 2018 and 2019. Under the Oak Harbor Municipal Code, Chapter 2.02, the Salary Commission is to consider and establish appropriate compensation for the city council members and the mayor of the city of Oak Harbor. So you can read through the report in order of the process that the Salary Commission members went through to look at comparable data, review information, conduct different surveys to compile all of the data that they would need to come forward with their recommendation on any changes to compensation levels. So what they have determined is that there is a need for market adjustments to both the council members and the mayor's salary, and they determined that there was no need to make any changes to the benefit package. So we were looking at salary and benefits together as your full compensation package. Effective as of September 1st, 2019, a market salary adjustment is recommended for the mayor by an increase of 5% per month to align with the average of the comparable cities in accordance with the city compensation philosophy of a plus or minus 2% of the applicable market range. Also effective as of September 1st, 2019, a market salary adjustment is recommended for the council members by an increase of 10% per month to align with the average of the comparable cities in accordance with the city compensation philosophy of plus or minus the 2% of the applicable market range. In addition to the market adjustments, effective January 1st of 2020, The salary for the mayor and the council members shall be increased by the cost of living adjustment as provided to the non-represented employees of the city outside of uniform services or bargaining units. And that has been budgeted and approved for 2020 at 2.25%. So with all of that information, compensation shall be so determined and incorporated into the city budget without further action of the city council or the commission. And we are here to provide you with this information and ask if you have any questions.
Okay, this is not an action item for tonight.
It is
just
not an action item.
information, Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you to the commission for
Yes.
your time, volunteer time.
Thank you to Hal Hovey, the chair. Thank you to James Croft, Nora Daniel, Cheryl Lawler, and Melissa McCumber, who are all your salary commission members.
Any
Okay.
other questions?
Okay.
And when was the last?
The last report in order from the salary commission was in 2006. So it's been several years.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. We then move on to item number B, health reimbursement arrangement, voluntary employees beneficiary association.
Yes. So thank you again, Emma House from Human Resources. I'm very excited to bring this forward to you today for education and information. Hopefully we'll bring it forward on a council agenda for approval very soon. Human Resources, myself, and our HR generalist, Kim Andrews, have been working on this since late 2017. So there's been a very long process of us gathering information and making sure we had a really good understanding as to what this benefit option could be. Human Resources administers all of your health benefit plans for your employees, and this falls underneath that umbrella. We are here to recommend that the city establish this plan option for our employees. And I've brought Emily Spencer, who is our client consultant from Gallagher Benefit Services, to give you more information about what the HRA VIBA plan is and how that would work for our city.
Thanks so much, Emma. So what I was hoping to cover a little bit tonight, and feel free to ask questions as we go, because I know it's going to be a lot of information, and I work in insurance all day, every day, so I might go too fast, so let me know if I'm not clear, was just to let you know a little bit about the growing cost of retiree health care. What is our plan? What is the HRA VIBA plan? What does the adoption process kind of look like? And about us as HRA VIBA Trust in a snapshot to provide you a little bit of background knowledge for who we work with as well. So to start with, what is an HRA? HRA stands for Health Reimbursement Arrangement. It's really a group health plan. Every fund that comes into the plan is considered employer funded, and there's many ways that the city can allow for funding, and what is being proposed is going to be the sick leave cash out that employees are currently getting paid out as cash taxable wage to come into HRA VIBA fully tax-free. So the city saves the FICA tax, and then the employee saves FICA and their normal tax as well, their income tax. The term VIBA is also used as well. VIBA stands for Voluntary Employee Beneficiary Association. To kind of generalize this, VIBA is the trust where assets are held. HRA is the tax code that is used to define how people can utilize these funds. Once money comes into the HRA, employees are eligible to then reimburse themselves, their spouse or dependents tax-free for any medical expense, including premiums that they incur, once the funds are in there. And while the money is sitting in there, it's an investment account where employees can actually invest their funds, and any investment growth is theirs tax-free. So it's a triple tax advantage plan. Money goes in tax-free, investment growth is tax-free, and it comes out fully tax-free. The catch is it's only used for any medical, including premiums, during retirement. So kind of why this got started, and one of the areas that it's really popular with is when people are thinking about retirement. The average cost of Medicare during retirement is a staggering number. So this slide just depicts what the average cost for medical premiums would be during retirement. So if you're a couple that both retire at age 65, live until 84, you need to budget roughly $184,000 for Medicare premiums. And that's a number that keeps a lot of employees working longer and make because the benefits are rich here and premium is very expensive. So hopefully this will help employees with those costs during retirement. So as Emma mentioned, we've been talking for a long time about, what is HRA VIBA, how could that work with the city? And so some of the adoption process that we've talked about already is that defined who would be eligible. So the Public Works Department has expressed interest, and it would be the employees that were hired prior to October 20th, 1998. Why them? Well, they're the ones that are eligible for that sick leave cash out already to be paid to them. So this would be just transferring that from being paid as cash taxable wage into HRA VIBA. I've actually met myself and Emma with the group a few times, and we've all conducted educational meetings. Everybody's in 100% agreement that they feel that this is something they would like to do. And what would need to move forward would be a signed adoption agreement to formalize joining a multiple employer trust. So in addition to the tax-free benefit, there are other benefits that the HRA plan has. One is that they can also use their account at any time. So if somebody retires at, let's say 65, there's no time frame for when they have to utilize these funds. So they can choose to use them, or they can say they really like the market and they want to invest it longer. That's up to them. Their funds are eligible to them once they hit the account, and they get to decide when they use them and for what expenses. They also get to choose their individual elections of investments from our pre-mixed portfolio, which will help them narrow down their options a little bit. And lastly, should they pass away, they would actually have this transferred to their spouse or dependents. Should they not have a spouse or dependent, we actually have the ability with our trust for them to designate a beneficiary, so that way it would pass on to them. What's the advantage to the city with that is you don't have to worry about forfeitures as frequently, because there should always be somebody that this benefit can pass on to. So just a good visual. The reminder for the savings for the city is the FICA, so everybody has the win-win of savings. The employees would also save roughly that 25% federal income tax, because cash outs especially are going to be assessed at a higher rate of tax. So with that, the employee keeps 100% and the city saves that additional 7.65. So I mentioned a couple things of what people can use this for: deductibles, co-pays, vision, dental, Medicare, COBRA premiums are just to name a few. IRS code 213D is what dictates what any tax-free program, FSA, HRA, HSA, you name the three-letter acronym, that's what it's controlled by. Basically anything a doctor tells you you have to have done, or any medically necessary transport that is federally legal, would be reimbursable in some way, shape, or form under the plan. So the uses are rather endless. And a little bit of history about the HRA VIBA plan. So it's a trust. I work for Gallagher, and then there's the trust HRA VIBA Trust. There's also the VIBA Trust, which is within the school districts. So we do educational consulting for both of those. This trust was established in 1990, and it's a 3-state trust. So Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. Public agencies are able to participate within this trust. And we have over 600 employers within the three states that are part of the trust, and over 65,000 participants. The service is done locally. I would be the client consultant, and then there's a customer care team in Spokane. How does the fee structure work might be a question that you're wondering too. There is no charge to the city for adoption. There is no fees in that way. The fees get run out of the participant account, $1.50 per month if they have a balance under $5,000, and then there's an annualized asset-based fee of 1.10% roughly on their account balance. So there's no direct charge to the city for setting this up. And that's HRA VIBA in a really fast nutshell for you. And there is a quick facts document on page 34 and 35 of your program if you wanted to take a look at what that information is. And then there's also the adoption agreement, a sample if you wanted to read what the language would be, since you should be joining a multiple employer trust. We've outlined all that for you, and that's formalized on page 39 onward.
Two things to kind of follow up. Emma talked about that the city's been looking at this for quite some time, and there was a thorough process in vetting different firms. And then Gallagher was the firm that staff went with for a number of reasons. And the other issue is you mentioned the groups. There wasn't an interest citywide, but there was an interest in the Public Works non-representative employees group. And so we're only applying this to the groups that 100% of those people in that group want to participate in. So there is a savings to the city with the FICA issue, so it's a win-win for the city and the employees. But we wanted to set a precedent that, because once we do this, the city can unilaterally do this, but I think in an implementation policy point of view, we only want to implement it to the groups that really want it, so it's mutually beneficial.
Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify, I think I got
It's a lot of information, don't worry.
I have that HRA Viva plan for my full-time job, and I opt out of their health insurance since I get health insurance through the city. So my opt-out amount is put on my Viva card every month, and I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. But my question is, the language and the emphasis here is the only contributions the city would be making to Viva accounts would be in the form of payout for unused leave.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanna make
Unused
sure
sick
that's
leave.
the only.
That's the only thing we're looking at right
Okay.
now for this specific group.
And only for employees that start at Public Works who started before '98?
Yes, and that are also non-represented, not in a union group.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to verify.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe I read in the report it's about 9 employees we're talking about.
9 employees.
And they've all decided they want to do this.
They've all decided, they gave us a verbal okay, and then I also went back and had them each sign an individual acknowledgement that they agreed to accept into this plan.
Okay, so my last question is on this gross pay cash out example. Is this an all or nothing option? Because, uses, for example, $10,000.
Yes.
Do they have to put their entire cash out into this, or can they split that and take some cash out?
Yeah, the group has decided at this time, so with an HRA Viva, it is all or none from a funding perspective, so that's why everybody has to agree to the same amount. And the group at this time has decided 100% of their cash out is what their intent would be that they would want to come into the plan. If they wanted to do 50% cash, 50% HRA Viva, that would be fine as long as that was for the contracted duration of time.
We have to make it defined by the plan, so we can't have the employee pick a scale. The tax law doesn't allow us to do that.
On page 51 of your packet, it gets pretty specific that each of these employees, that based on their years of service, would have a certain percent of that sick leave balance that they have on the books put into there. So it's very specific.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify, it is only the sick leave buyout. If the employees and they're in this group have vacation buyout,
Yes.
that does not go into the leave.
They still get that.
It was just the sick leave.
Just wanted to ensure that the V that stands for voluntary was truly that.
The V that stands for voluntary is almost a misnomer because it's a voluntary choice, I guess, to choose to vote on it, but once that has been agreed to that length of time, there's no individual, you can't decide, I'd like to take my cash out as cash, and then somebody else say they want it to go to Viva. So that can be kind of the challenge with getting the plan set up, and that's why they're starting, I think, where they are.
Yeah, with a small group.
Thank you.
Councilor Sebelius.
Thank you. I support this. I'm very familiar with HSAs.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of a
Sure.
bigger version.
Yep.
So trying to get my head around why, unless it's in the adoption agreement, why can't this be available for everyone? Or each group has to go decide on the amount they want to participate and then go all or none? It can't be something that could be citywide and people could use unused sick leave?
Correct. It cannot be individual choice, so the groups would all have to agree to adopt. Normally what's happens is there's a resolution, a formal employer adoption, and then after that there's some ability to say, we'll do memorandum of understanding to modify existing contracts without reopeners to say everybody in Group A is going to fund with their sick leave cash out at retirement as after one group has adopted. It's very common to start with one subset or one grouping and then have it expand from there.
Okay. And so for you, Emma, we've floated this out. Everyone's aware of the option.
Yes.
It's only this group
We've been very clear in communicating that it's very specific to just this group only. There was a concern from many employees that we would implement citywide, and we wanted to make sure that we had employees who wanted this and agreed to it.
It's one of those things I think people take the time to understand that the tax savings is fairly impressive. We're all going to have healthcare needs. Last question, Dan. I think you said this or implied you vetted a lot of firms.
Yes. So we actually started this process with the Association of Washington Cities, because all of our health plan benefits come through them with our group plans. And we reached out to them and asked them for recommendations on vendors. And they recommended 2 different vendors that they say they work with for the HRA plans. And we chose Gallagher because their fees were a lot better, a lot less.
Okay. You have my support. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Okay, I'll hope to bring it forward with a resolution very soon.
Great.
Thank you.
We will move on to Public Works, 2019-2020 vehicle and equipment replacements. Sandra, welcome, Sandra.
Good evening.
Kathy comes back.
Sorry. I did make them if they wanted them, but okay. So we have been working on some of the budgeted replacements for 2019 and 2020. So let's just jump in. The first one is called the Advantage lift. This is the big lift, the 75,000 pound lift that's in the mechanic shop. We're proposing to replace it with a very similar 75,000 pound lift. The reason being is that Advantage has been bought out by Rotary. Rotary is one of the state contract vendors that we looked at. We have a budget estimate of $150,000. The state contract price for this lift is actually $158,709.39. We looked at, there was about 5 vendors. We looked at all of them. 2 of them submitted in quotes, and the low bid was actually one that was called from Mohawk versus Rotary. But the problem with their bid is it did not include site alteration. So with the Rotary one, it's basically a plug and play. They have the same structure footing. With the Mohawk, we would have to rip up the flooring, redo everything, and that would add an additional $5,000 plus, which puts them over the other bid. So we have suggested, we actually have the funding to cover that additional $8,709 that was not budgeted. In the equipment rental fund, we have $160,000 sitting there. The justification is that it's showing wear and tear. The pins, cylinders, hose, airline sensors, all of those have aged. We've been trying to patch them up because you can't actually get parts for this lift anymore. And there's often times where they actually have to manually reset it where it should do it on its own. And that could eventually cause a safety issue because it's unbalanced. And you're not going to put a garbage truck up there if it's unbalanced. So we're looking to replace it based on that. It's used daily. It's used for the garbage trucks, the fire engines, all of the big rigs. And as I said, the company no longer exists. So we're proposing to use the state contract pricing and avoid the actual formal bid process on that one. This one's kind of fun. This one came from the old shop. So we don't even know the exact year that this was actually put into the old shop. Rich thinks it was in the late 1980s, but he doesn't even know, and he's the last one that would even know. So the problem with this lift is, let's start with this. So we're replacing a 1980s spare lift. It's 6,000 pounds with a larger lift that's 12,000 pounds. We have a budget estimate of $20,000. The pricing came in at $16,563.31. Again, we asked for quotes. We obtained 2 off the state contract, and the lower of the quote has been proposed, and that happens to come from the same company, Rotary. We have the funding in the equipment rental replacement fund for that purchase as well. Any question on the lift so far? I guess I could break it up here. So far? Okay. We're going into the captain's car. We mentioned this one back when we did the fire command unit, but we were not ready to go forward with it at the time. We are now. This is the actual captain's car that's used by Captain Bailey right now. The one for Captain Wilkie will be identical, so that's why I just put the picture up there of that's the back end of it as well as the front. We're replacing a 2003 Chevrolet Impala with this SUV, a 2020 SUV for the second captain's car, so they're going to have the exact same setup. Budget estimate was $50,000. The state contract on just the vehicle alone was the $43,154.04. Outfitting done by our normal SPS is $8,000. Total replacement cost is not to exceed the $51,154, and we actually have the $52,463 sitting in the fund right now. Justification, it's budgeted. P4 meets the replacement criteria. It's necessary to move the second captain to the same platform as the first captain. It's better for better performance, as well as to make sure that he can do his command duties. The Impala and a smaller vehicle that we currently have on the fleet, they're just worn out and they're too small to do the job. You can't put all that gear in them. Any question on the captain's car? Okay. This one is the roll-off truck that's used by solid waste. And we're proposing to replace, and excuse me, those first three will be on your city council agenda, the first one in September. These ones that we're going into now, we're going to bring forward on September 17th because we're not ready to do the numbers with, the vendor still has not submitted in the final numbers to us. But we won't hit a council workshop before that. So I'm just gonna throw it on here with this one. We're replacing a 1999 Peterbilt roll-off truck with a 2020 Peterbilt roll-off truck. We'd like to keep the old truck for the clean water facility to haul their biosolids, which they're using right now in addition to the solid waste department. We'd like to order them early, so technically these were budgeted for 2020, but based on our last garbage truck that we ordered last November, that's not going to come here till November this year. We're a year out for delivery because of production. So we're asking to order it now. Delivery won't happen, payment won't happen till the 2020 budget where it's actually budgeted. The budget estimate is $250,000. Again, I don't have the final estimate cost, but they kind of told me it was be around $225,000, so don't hold me to that one. We're proposing to use a new thing instead of it, and typically our garbage trucks, we've been piggybacking off the City of Tacoma contract. That has now expired. So we looked for different ways to do it, whether we were going to formally bid or whatnot. Well, it just so happens that we are also a member of the National Joint Power Alliance, which is called the NJPA, which is now called Sourcewell. And that's through an interlocal agreement as well. And it does the same thing as the state contract. It serves as a municipal contracting agency. So we're going to utilize that procurement in this for this purchase. And we have the suggested funding of $250,000 is already sitting in the replacement program for this particular truck.
Sandra,
Yes.
do we have to put a deposit on this to place the order now or not?
No.
Oh, okay.
And everything, warranty, everything does not start till it hits the site. So there's no, yes, go ahead.
Sure.
Yes.
What is that, picture that one, what is the $225,000?
Oh, it's going to look very similar to this one, just updated technology. And I think they're also putting a trailer hitch on the back in case they ever had to tow anything in addition.
First one I can get, seemed reasonable, that's 200.
That lift system is intense. That's what's picking up those 20-yard dumpsters. That particular one I think is a pawl finger is called, but it's a really interesting thing where they just lay it down and pick it up. It's like the swap loaders, the transformer type of a system. And that's not the only thing it can haul is 20-yard dumpsters. We can do other things with it, but we don't here in the city. But the potential is there. But yes, that one's $225,000 compared to a garbage truck, which is coming up. That's going to be $325,000. That has the different, body, same chassis basically, but different body. Yes.
Do we do all of our dumpsters with just that one?
No, this is for the big 20-yard ones.
Okay.
The little dumpsters we have a smaller truck for those.
Yeah, but we just have the one for the big.
Yes. Oh yeah, this is only one truck we own.
This is what took those roll-off containers out to the property cleanup sites.
Okay.
This is the truck that hauled those.
So this has been very beneficial in our illegal.
Yeah,
Cleanup.
definitely. And we've had it since 1999. We've used it. It's well used. Justification, it's a budgeted item for 2020. Like I said, the ETA could be 9 months. It's looking more like a year. It's used by the clean water facility to haul biosolids. I can tell you right now that it smells. It has destroyed the cab. The smell of it permeated into the truck, and so it's not a pleasant drive. The solid waste has to work around the clean water facility right now due to the biosolids. So if they need to use it and they're using it, they've just worked out a plan together to however they're doing it. Previous biosolids were stored at the seaplane-based wastewater lagoons, and they were removed periodically. Suggesting to keep the old truck so the Clean Water facility can keep the stinky truck and have the solid waste, have the new truck, and be able to use it the way that's supposed to be being used for their 20-yarders. And the nice thing too is it is a backup they both will have a backup as well if we keep it. We have 3 recycled trucks budgeted for 2020. Only 2 of the 3 meet criteria, so we're only going to talk about replacing 2 of them right now. The other one will just be bumped out. We're replacing 2 2012 Peterbilt recycle trucks with 2 2020 Peterbilt recycle trucks. It's going to have a different back end. These ones are called curb tenders. These new ones are going to be Labreeze. We're ordering in 2019 again for delivery in 2020. We're trading in the old trucks. We're not keeping them. Budget estimate is $350,000 for each. Again, we're going to use the NJPA contracts, estimated about $350,000. That's the high end. It's going to be lower than that. And the total replacement cost, he's promised me he's going to give me the numbers this week, so I'll be able to present it in September at council. Suggested funding is we have $375,536 in each truck for replacement, so it will cover that. I'll just jump there. I've said that again. The ETA 74 and 75 meet the replacement criteria. There's some upcoming repairs within the next year and a half. We could probably get by to 2 years maybe by the time it gets delivered. The flooring needs to be resurfaced by that time. There's going to be holes in the floor. The packers need to be replaced. The sidearms will have to be rebuilt. We've already done that to older trucks. And potential repairs, these curb tender bodies in our 2014 vehicles are actually failing, and in order to repair them, we have to replace them. They don't have the controls anymore. They've already cycled them out. So that's a $15,000 job. So if we replace them before that happens, that's ideal. We don't know we don't know that it will happen, but it's already happening in the 2014s, and these are 2012s. So we're just suggesting that there is potential repairs. And I just highlighted the ones we're going to be using for all these purchases. We're going to be using the state contract for the first 3, and we're going to be using the National Joint Purchasing Alliance for the last 3. So, yes.
So first up, I'm one of your biggest fans. You have come before us many times. You've got a really concise program that every time I'm amazed that you're able to squeeze out every bit of life from most of our vehicles before we replace them. With the last 2, just a couple of my concerns,
Yes.
they're only 8 years old, so that seems pretty new. But the other thing is we don't know what's going on with the future of our recycling program. There are international forces at work where we had this conversation not long ago. We really don't know what this looks like for us 3-6 months down the road, a year down the road from now. So I guess my question is, will these make it for a little bit longer while we try and figure out what those changes look like?
We could totally do that, but the repairs will be done. So you're talking 30, 50,000 plus a potential of another 15,000 if that cylinder goes down. That might happen within that time frame. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, what I wanted to say about the recycle program is whether or not our customers put it in the blue bin or the gray bin for solid waste, we still have that amount of material to pick up.
Okay,
And so we would, if we don't do recycling, these are going to be used to pick up garbage.
Yes, exactly. They're versatile.
God forbid, totally disappears.
Yeah.
We would still have a use for these.
Yeah, exactly. They're the same trucks. We just call them recycle trucks and residential trucks, but they're the same trucks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good question, though.
Councilor Hudson?
Thank you. Other than saving the roll-off truck for the clean water facility use, what happens to the rest of these? Will they be surplus, traded in?
The refuse or the recycle trucks will be traded in for an amount, and that's also going to be presented this week from the vendor. I don't know what it is. Last time, one went for $15,000, another one went for $30,000. So we're looking at that kind of a range for trade-in. It's not a lot. It is, yes, it is. And then for the cop cars, we would be more than likely putting those on an auction site for that one. And then the small lift is being disposed of on our behalf, and the big lift, we have to figure out how to get rid of it ourselves. Yes.
On the captain's car, there's certain electronic stuff that we can take off and put into the new car or not? It's built in?
Yes, the items on the Impala, and correct me, Chief, other than the radio, or I don't even
We
think
have
the
a
radio.
radio we obtained on a grant.
Thank you.
We've had for a period of time, that'll be going in there. Brand new radio, new functions, new features. Everything else we can pull off, we will. It's a different platform, so we won't be able to reutilize the lights and that kind of stuff most likely, but that's in the SPS bid. So the numbers you see up there will be, we'll pull out what we can, some of it we're limited because of the different platform.
Okay, understand, thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good report. Okay, we will then go to our planning section, development services. We'll start with the Shoreline Master Program periodic review. Our senior planner, Mr. Lefevre, joining us, and Steve Powers. Coming back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Again, this is the next episode of our Shoreline Master Program presentation, and describe to you basically our work effort that we're looking at doing and pretty much the steps that we are at right now. The last presentation that we made was back at your February workshop, and just to reiterate briefly, I discussed the Shoreline Management Act, the implications as to how we implement that act locally, and that's through our Shoreline Master Program. Our last major comprehensive update was back in 2013. Well, actually, we adopted it locally in 2012. The state adopted it in 2013. And this periodic review is mandated by WAC, and we are obligated to have this completed by end of June of next year. So we're moving forward, taking our steps as we need to. There's one distinction I'd like to make. As I mentioned, our current Shoreline Master Program was recently really comprehensively updated. That incorporated a lot of the rule changes that were done back in the early 2000, 2003 by the Department of Ecology. It involved a lot of really intense pieces that were integral into that Shoreline Master Program. I have those listed up there. I wanted to make the distinction that this is not similar to that effort. It's not a comprehensive update. However, it's periodic review. So we are mandated to look at some of the pieces of this Shoreline Master Program. I'll go into those in a little bit more detail in just a minute. But I wanted to make that distinction. We're not going to be looking at our cumulative impact analysis. We don't have to do a new restoration plan. Those were all major intense efforts as part of the last update. So just to keep that clear. But there are some specific steps that we need to look at for this periodic review. We obviously are creating a new public participation program, which kind of gives us a track as to how we present it to you folks, the Planning Commission, the various stakeholders, coordinate with other agencies, such as I've had meetings with Island County staff on their update process, as well as other agencies. I've already had conversations with our regional representative from the Department of Ecology. And there are 3 specific items identified in the WAC that we need to make sure that we at least address in our periodic update. One of them is that we make sure that we incorporate the latest and greatest rule changes that the DOE have implemented, not only from their standpoint, but also to the Act itself. We need to make sure that we are consistent with any local planning efforts that we have in place and development regulations, and also review our Shoreline Master Program for any new information or any circumstances that may have changed locally that could impact our Shoreline Master Program. So going into a little bit more detail, number 1, we addressed the shoreline, or the new amendments, the new changes to the Act. We actually had some guidance document prepared from the Department of Ecology that goes back year by year to 2007, which is at least 6 years before our adoption that we had in 2013. It also provided some review considerations and some sample language if we decided to incorporate that, those revisions, or if we had to, and I'll certainly present those at a subsequent meeting. That initial review has been completed. There is some revisions that we'll be presenting to you at a later date. We'll also have some internal staff review, and the process for looking at those revisions will come before the Planning Commission this fall. Dealing with the second issue, there was quite a number of documents that I pulled out to make sure that our Shoreline Master Program still is consistent with the policies of our comp plan, and I won't go through all of these. There's actually 2 slides full of them. There's about 14 documents that I researched to make sure that we are still consistent with that. And they're not only local, but there's also some other documents that we need to make sure we're consistent with. Puget Sound Partnership, Island County has some documents that I just wanted to make sure that we're linked up with their planning efforts as well. The second phase to this step, of course, is the development regulation consistency. And as you're well aware, we've had some major amendments to our code that deal with natural resources. Our critical areas were updated. We completed that effort about a year ago. So I'm looking at the consistency that we have with that new CAO to our SMP, acronyms. We can't live without them. We also had a change in our flood damage prevention and our low impact development standards, which certainly could impact some of the uses that we have in our shorelands. We had a slight change to our permit process in Title 18, and as well as the stormwater permit regulations. So we're looking at all of those pieces of development regulations to make sure that our policies and regs in the master program is consistent as well. This piece should be also moving forward to the Planning Commission the fall of this year. And the last one that we're mandated to look at is any change circumstances, new information, improved data. This one's a little bit more of a tough one to get your arms around because staff, quite frankly, doesn't have the knowledge of what new really is, or what's best available science now. So I have reached out to the Department of Ecology and asked for some of their guidance, some of their suggestions that they might see for us. In fact, our regional representative is the same person that worked with us on our last process for the SMP, so that's an advantage. He's had feet on the ground here, so that will help us. One of the emerging topics that we will have to address, at least to some degree, whether that's a policy decision by this group, we'll have to see, but it's sea level rise, and how will that impact our shoreline master program. And we're looking right now at those potential amendments that involve new or updated information. We do have, the other thing too is there's some minor boo-boos that were in the old plan, so we're going to clean those up as well. One thing that I would like to get this afternoon is some direction. We have an option on our review process of this document. I don't know if many of you were here for the last process, but the way it was prescribed in the WAC is it was fairly cumbersome, where we needed to take our process through our local adoption, ship it off to the Department of Ecology, where they would review it. 90% of the time would have some revisions that would have to come back to this group for a review and potentially an amendment to the already adopted document, then be shipped back to the Department of Ecology for their final approval. Well, looking at the dates, that took about a year to do that at the last effort. So what they're proposing as an option, and I'm proposing for your direction, is that they are consulted early in the process. I've already reached out to them, but they would be linked up with that review process earlier, meaning that they would have a concurrent comment period as far as when we would open it up for review by our stakeholders and the list of agencies that we would want to send it to. Ecology would do that at the same time at the state level for their agency review. We would have a shared public hearing, and then we would have a comment. If there were comments received, we would have a response. We would submit that whole document off to ecology for their initial determination of consistency. Once we got that, it would go back through our local adoption process. And then it would be, I think, a fairly slam dunk once we adopted it, that ecology would adopt it as well. I'm just asking, it might be need for more thought, or if you had some more questions. I did include in your packet a document that kind of steps you through that process more clearly. But I'd like to know if you had some thoughts or some direction to get that today, so that I can start this process with ecology and let them know that we're going to engage in this. Just an FYI, Island County is doing this new process with ecology. So that's the end of my presentation. We will be more frequent in 6 months on giving you update on this process, since we're moving along fairly quickly now. So just any questions?
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I was reading through this, and in what you're stating now, it seems like this streamlines the process. It gets us through it quicker, and it consolidates some of that process. When I read through this earlier in the week, I was wondering what's the downside. So what's the downside?
I didn't go through the last process.
I don't think there is one, Mr. Larson. It bears remembering that this is a unique plan in that Department of Ecology actually has approval authority. And so the old process, council, whether it's you or other councils, adopts the document, but your decision isn't actually final. The document's not final until ecology also approved it. And that's unique in terms of our planning documents. And that old process, I think, has the opportunity for confusion because there, as Dennis said, last time there was about a year that elapsed between the time council took their action and we were finally able to get it back from ecology, incorporate what they wanted, and then have you re-adopt it. That causes confusion for the public and confusion for the council, and really just seems like unnecessary steps. So I don't think there is a downside to this. I suppose if for some reason we were operating in a much more complex shoreline environment in terms of the issues involved, that maybe this streamlining could potentially bring a lot of things all at one time, but that's not the world that we are operating here in Oak Harbor. So I think it's only upsides.
Well, thanks. Then I would certainly sign off on the option of review process. Thank you.
Thank you. My question, I guess, is, first of all, I love that the state has provided 8 pages of type guidance in terms of how to conduct the public review process so that it's consistent. That kind of demystifies it, which is fantastic. I guess my question is, well, there's not necessarily a downside other than the work involved. Because of existing rules and regulations and all of the ecology requirements that we already have, what is it that we could hear from the public that would influence our planning process and our final decisions? I mean, I don't know how much wiggle room there is. I love engaging the public, but I wouldn't want a bunch of people to put a lot of effort into trying to contribute for us to just say, yeah, we can't do that.
I'll start this, and Steve, you can follow up. But initially, I don't see any disadvantage to the process and citizen engagement. The time periods are set by statute. Those aren't going to change. It's just that we would have Department of Ecology at the public hearing as well to respond to any questions. So I think there's some real positives to be gained. Plus, it's inefficient. As Steve mentioned, it's potentially an extra year of staff time to work on getting this process once we potentially get some changes from the Department of Ecology. So it saves staff time.
There's not a downside, obviously, to engaging the public. I'm sensitive to your concern and I appreciate it. If it doesn't seem like that participation can change the outcome any.
Yeah, I don't always anybody's time.
And that's very valid. And in fact, Dennis and I are having sort of a series of ongoing conversations trying to figure out, with this level of effort, do we need to have the same citizens review committee that we used the last time? And we think the answer to that question is really no. Last time there were just a ton of things, that many of which were new, that really it warranted having a focus group, essentially, for lack of a better phrase, that with citizens comprised of just regular citizens as well as property owners within the shoreline area to help us sort through the myriad of choices that we had. This time we don't have that same number of choices, and so we're really envisioning that the majority of the public process is just taking place at the Planning Commission. So citizens who wish to participate can participate. You've heard me say before, and I think it bears repeating, that there is no more complex environment for permitting and land use than the first 200 feet of the shoreline. And just the list of things that Dennis said he had to review gives you a clue of all of the overlapping things that happen inside of that 200 feet. So even in the best of circumstances, there's not a lot of things that we can change at the local level. But what we can learn is, are there things out there that are happening on those shoreline properties that we're not necessarily aware of, that somehow we can help through our planning effort? I think that's where the real value in engaging our citizens are going to be. Plus, it's always good practice to engage citizens when you're updating a plan.
So with the Planning Commission process being a number of meetings, we've already had public participation by residents who are concerned with our shoreline plan. So the opportunities there is going to be there over every meeting. It's at the Planning Commission. There's that opportunity. So there's a lot of opportunity, even though we have maybe not doing a formal group or such, but there's certainly, given the length of time and all the time that we spend on this, there's a lot of avenues for people to join in and to know about this process.
Sounds like there's a lot of opportunity for both sides to learn a lot from each other. I'm sold.
Councilor Sebelius.
Thank you. Can you back up on your 4-ish slides, please? You were talking about checking with consistency, probably right here. Consistency with a lot of these different entities and their regulations. Well, let me ask a question. I'll follow up with the statement and you can go. I'm curious, what takes precedence in all this? When we check for consistency, what's the guiding, overriding precedent here? And the reason I asked that, we were, Blaine, myself, Patricia, were at a conference recently, and I had breakfast with a city administrator from a neighboring community. And we got talking about housing, all those challenges, and then we talked about stormwater and LD, and ecology came up. And their city's take, and this is a fairly cursory conversation, but I definitely want to follow up with them, and I'll get you in contact with them, was that they look at Department of Ecology as guidance, but not gospel. And so a lot of the stuff that they're doing is fairly, we've used the term pushback, but they're very much focusing on development growth, taking ecology's guidance, but not necessarily always using it as gospel, was the way the city administrator said that. So I was like, So I guess when you check for consistency, what is the overriding, what takes precedence here as far as other municipalities or not municipalities, but organizations? How do we weigh in there?
That's a very good question, because that one actually came into my head as I was looking through some of these documents. How would we look at resolving a conflict? Well, fortunately, I didn't have to really answer that because we are pretty consistent. We are consistent with all those documents as far as, and their policy and guidance deals with many other items than what we do with our shoreline. Fisheries or some other type of water quality issue that we have no issue with. So there is consistency with all these documents, and I didn't really have to answer that. So I don't know how I would have answered that, to be honest with you.
But I think I can, if I could.
Sure.
So I think it depends on which part of ecology, Department of Ecology, we're talking about. So the permit, the phase 2 permit, that's, as you've learned over the years, much more rigid. the guidance that we get from them in terms of updating something like the Shoreline Master Program, the last time at least, we had ranges of choices, policy choices. Now, some of them were a little more narrowly tailored than others, but others we had an opportunity to make local choices, and that's what we did with our 2012 plan. So I think the shortest answer is it depends what part of ecology we're talking to. And as Dennis mentioned earlier, we happen to be very fortunate in this area that our local representative with ecology in this area is very much solution oriented. He's sort of the guy, he's the kind of guy that says, this is what this guidance says, this is what I think it could mean to you, here are your choices. And so we have a great planning partner with that particular gentleman.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
You guys will just sit right there.
Move on to
It's short.
Transportation
Okay,
Improvement Program.
I didn't know he was here. He snuck in on me.
See Leonard Gack come in, doing this. Welcome, Gack.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm here to tell you about an action you don't have to take. Every year we went through an approval process for a TIP, if the council remembers. And the impetus comes from a requirement for the state. So the state is required to compile a statewide TIP, a STIP. And their requirement to populate this STIP is that they get a list of all the projects that are federally funded from the county and then from the state, or from the cities. So they kind of funnel this information to populate this state TIP. So in order to populate this STIP, they require that the cities and the counties provide these projects that are approved locally by the jurisdiction. So you're basically not submitting a whole bunch of list of projects that nobody knows about. You're sending an approved list. So when in talking to the state officials, we were talking to them about our CIP process and how all our transportation projects are in our capital improvement plan. And they're like, oh yeah, if you have that satisfies the tip. Basically, if you look at the RCWs, it says you need to have a 6-year transportation program. It's called differently by different cities, different counties. For us, our capital improvements plan meets all the requirements of the TIP. So we don't need to have a separate action to adopt a separate TIP. Our CIP serves that purpose. So when we have to send a list of projects to the county, we can take the approved projects from the CIP and send it. We don't need to do a separate action to do that. And so that's what I'm here to say. We forwarded the list of projects that are already in the CIP. It's the Northeast 7th Avenue, the Heller Street project, and the Veterans Park approval. Those are our federally funded projects. Those are in our CIP. We forwarded that to the county. County will forward that to the state and go. No separate action is needed. So that's what I'm here to tell you about, just in case you have any questions on why you're not taking any action with the TIP.
I have a question.
Sure.
I was at the regional transportation meeting, and we were looking over the strategic island access proposed 2040 strategic action. That's why I have 2020 proposed efforts are shaded anyway. And under number 16, develop an intricate system and modes plans for Oak Harbor and SR 20. And if it isn't on our 6-year list about the roundabouts at Swantown, stuff like that, they're not going to forward that to try to help legislation and get that approved. So, was it taken off or not? Because they want to do it, but then someone said, well, if it's not on your 6-year plan, then we can't put it on their list. And I was quite concerned because the sooner we can get that, we might have some traffic jams out of the way. So that's just my question, because I was at that meeting and I couldn't answer it.
Absolutely. So if you remember, we did have the SR20 project in our CIP 20-year. I mean, we still have a 20-year list of projects, and the SR20 transportation project is in there. It's just not in our CIP. A few years ago, I think there was a conscious decision because of where where is the funding going to come from in terms of listing it on our plans? I think there was 2 or 3 years ago there was a conscious decision about that, and there was a decision that was made at that time that we'll put this project on when we have the money, when we know it's coming, right? So the state has it in their 2027 list of projects to do. The RTP is doing this, and I've actually been already contacted by the RTPO member that I think the policy board met last night, and they had a conversation like exactly about the issue that you're talking about. And so what we can do, it doesn't have to be in our tip this year, but we can start, we're going through our CIP update process. You'll probably see it in the next month or so. And we'll be adding another year to our CIP. So 2019 falls off and we add 2025, I think is our 6th year that we add, because we need a 6-year plan. And so one of the things that we can put in there is to start looking for that project. So it'll get into our CIP this year. And then that way it'll start to track with the RTP project. It just was outside of our 6-year window. So anytime you want to put a project in the CIP, you want to identify a funding source, you want to put the money in there, and there are different strategies for doing that. I think the project that they have in the RTP plan is to actually do a comprehensive study to see whether the old idea still works. Do you want to look at the entire corridor? Do you want to look at a different solution for this? And you want to have that done before the money is available in 2027, kind of going into the project. So we can start planning for that in our 6-year CIP. And so this year, I think when we come to you with the CIP, that may be one of the choices that you may have to make. Should we add the SR 20 project in, and how do we want to do that?
Okay, well, I just, you had someone from Department of Transportation and this and that, and it's kind of like you can't get money or help to do the study unless you have the project listed.
Yeah.
And that was the confusion, and so I was very concerned that we don't have a plan to have that researched again, because then we'll miss out on the funding. So
there's been a lot of coordination between city staff and county staff and the RTPO on this particular topic. Yeah.
And I know I share your enthusiasm and your concern, and certainly staff will review the conflict and resolve it, and if needed, bring it to the council so that we eliminate that potential conflict there.
But I was just trying to be sure I fight for what, this has kind of been put off for, since '05? It's been kicked down the road and kicked down the road and kicked down the road. And it's just like, if I'm supposed to represent our city and do this, I need to be sure that I'm a good advocate, but I need to have the tools.
Absolutely. So we can consider that in our CIP for this year, where various ways of dealing with it. But the RTPO is required to do a TIP as well, and I think that's what they're asking, is like, how can we get it into their RTP in the 6-year plan? And they'll have to go through a process of moving that project forward as well. It'll go to the technical committee and the policy board. And of course, we're all in favor of trying to get that project in. The county recognizes too. So we don't have any real pushback on including this project in our CIP or the TIP. It's just the timing is correct right now. So we'll have to consider all of that.
Okay, well, they were just saying if it's not there, they can't advocate, and I'm just...
Absolutely.
I just want to be sure we are not missing out, and we're not pushing it down to 2027. It needs to be in their eyes sooner. It may be 27, hopefully not, but I need to be a good advocate, and I need to be sure we have the tools there.
Absolutely. We are in coordination with them in terms of this 2027 year and doing the things ahead in order to time it right. So we'll be talking to the RTPO and trying to make sure that it gets into their work program in early enough time, and there's funding for it. So it'll start to appear in the RTP for us and for the county, for the RTPO.
Okay. Councilor Rice?
Kat, I'm going to summarize. I know you told me if I have this right. The tip in our SIP is going into the STIP. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Make sure I got that.
Anyway.
A-okay.
Yes.
All right.
That was simple. I should have just said that and walked away.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
We're listening.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the second page. Item number C is small cell deployment.
Welcome back. Thank you. This will be a real quick item. As you recall, over the course of the last couple of years, we did a lot of work to work with Ogden, Murphy, and Wallace to create ordinances that dealt with small cell facilities, their location, our process, specific design standards for these facilities. We went through a lot of discussion last year. We got these in place. We got our ordinance, the code updated. We were able to include some local nuances by the concealment plans in special districts. Well, the FCC then, about a month later after we actually got these completed, came back and created a report and order that focused on 3 areas of small cell, and one of them is the permit review timelines that we had established, aesthetic requirements, and one-time recurring fees. So what we did was delve a little bit deeper into what the FCC was looking at doing to see what conformance what problems we might have with our existing code. Well, the shot clocks, basically what they're looking at doing or did is for existing poles, they want to shorten the time frame from 90 to 60 days. We can do that change by amending a portion of our code. They also implemented a 90-day process to look at siting small cell facilities on new or replacement poles. That's a new section. We added that. Their discussion on aesthetic requirements, they tightened it down a little bit, but they basically said that they must be reasonable, no more burdensome than those applied to other infrastructure objectives and published in advance. Upon review of what we had already established in our design standards for small cells, we're good with what we are requiring. We meet those objectives, so we're not going to make any changes to that portion of the code. And their report and order became fairly prescriptive as far as fees, but we're not going to include that as part of this proposed ordinance. That'll be another discussion at another time, and Nikki can lead that discussion. So what we're looking at is the process. Last night we had a public hearing, which is required for code amendment. Planning Commission is recommending approval to this body. We have this discussion today. I'm proposing that since it's such a minor amendment, we're only changing those 2 sections of code and adding another one which actually authorizes the fees, that we can place this on the consent agenda for your second meeting in September. So that is my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Mayor Brogan.
Do you have any, before when we were with Ogden in that process, they had some pictures to show on the guideline. Do you have any pictures on what we're approving as far as the guideline things, what they'll look like?
I had those in a previous presentation.
Okay.
I don't have those for tonight.
No, not for tonight, but just before we approve, even though it's on the consent agenda, we have some council members that weren't here when we were going through this process.
As part of that package,
I've
sure.
been through a lot with AWC, and we were kind of under the guideline that we got our thing in so we would have a say as a city, whereas others didn't. And so staff was well ahead of if we could just have it with the packet, because there's a history that some of us have and there's others that don't. It would be appreciative. I know you don't have it tonight. It's just, if possible, it would be nice to have.
And there are no changes to the design standards.
That's correct. Yeah, just
But there's some who
Right.
don't even
No,
know what
understand.
that
I just want to be clear
Yes,
that
yes. Right.
you're not going to be asked to make any changes to those
Right.
standards, because ours were actually in line with the new federal rules.
Yes.
Cool.
Okay, I'm just.
Yeah.
Councilor Beatty.
Thank you. Very similar to what Ms. Munns asked for. My son came home the other day extolling the virtues of 5G and asking me if I'd ever heard about it, like a microwave or something. I'm not that old. Anyway, I told him, yes, we're quite aware of that as a city, and we've gone through, he was just all turned on. But a refresher would be great, because I picture this being whoever starts rolling this out, I'm still concerned it's kind of the Wild West as far as trying to get your antenna on a pole first. Remind me, what do we have as far as design guidelines and aesthetics that we don't have? I need a refresher on this.
They're really, really detailed, and they're pretty prescriptive, but I think they're pretty sound as well. I instead of trying to recite what those are, I'd like to include that in your packet for the next time.
And I'm just wondering, I guess, whenever this technology finally comes to a carbon, is it going to be a rush? Is it AT&T or Verizon? Who gets there first? Who gets on the pole? They're not going to share the same antenna, correct?
They could, and I think I'm drawing a little bit from my experience and memory when we were with the consortium when we put the first rules in place. One of the reasons that the consortium was formed was to deal with the rush issue, and I mean the nature of the small cell is that there can be a lot of them in a relatively small area because you're filling in the gaps, you might recall, and so. What happens if on any given intersection you have 4 different poles and 4 different carriers, kind of a thing? And so our design guidelines, our aesthetic protections are unique for the central business district, in the maritime area, and then along the highway are basically our sensitive design issues. I don't think we get to have the ability to say, no to one carrier over another just because somebody's already in that area. I don't think we're allowed to do that. But what we do have is a very detailed permit process, which will treat all of them the same and require all of them to meet the same design standards, depending upon which area they're in. So I also think it's going to have a lot to do with who wants to be here, who wants to provide 5G to our community versus who may not want to. They're not exactly beating down the door right now. And so my guess is it's going to take a while before we start to see that. And potentially we learn some more from east side communities, maybe where your son was at.
Okay. And I would agree if we send that out ahead of time. If you're eyeballing the consent agenda, you get that out to us just in an email and say, hey, sure, that's fine, thanks.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Thanks, Dennis.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll go to the final section, the real final.
The real final.
Yeah, I remind you that you're for about 20 minutes.
Yeah, give the time. I'm going to go through this extra quick because I think that's probably fun, and just focus on the updates that happened from a week ago when I wrote this to right now. So, and then at the end, I'll open it up to any questions on the items. So just going right on to page 2 under economic development, we have officially signed the IRA with the Port of Coopville pledging $5,000 for the grant, and they're steaming ahead as they reported at the COG today with the study there. The other component regarding broadband and economic development is we've got a request from Anna Cordes to set up a meeting with the Public Works Director, and that will probably happen in the next 2 weeks. Moving down to Public Works, adding an item just as a reminder, the APWA award is on Monday, September 9th, and I know a number of council members are going to that. And regarding the Navy connection, we did have a meeting with them. They asked for some updates, material changes, but we will commit to providing the council a list of updates and kind of a summary of some of the updates that we're working on. It's more technical that they had. They asked a lot of good questions and just wanted us to be very thorough. So we did some minor changes with our proposal to clarify things for them. So that concludes my quick report, and I'll take any questions.
No questions? Councilor Isaac?
I have some questions, but they're not necessarily for you. So should I save those for?
Well, I can speak a lot of time for different departments, so being a city administrator, so this is
facet, so.
That's true, that's true. Okay, so you might be able to help me. If not, the Kevin or Kathy might be able to help. I've gotten some questions about Windjammer Park and litter that has been found, and I'm wondering what the morning procedure is for the park. Does Public Works or Parks go through and check everything and pick things up first thing in the morning? Is that done at night? What does that look like?
Yeah, I don't know that even, Kathy, can you try this one?
Like, who wanders around out there and makes sure everything looks good and when?
Ask for Laura.
That's true, yeah, David, yeah. We need to call David.
So we do have staff that goes out and checks things in first thing in the morning, opens up, they do their rounds, what is what they call it, but they may not be out doing complete park litter pickup at that time. So, but they do try to, whatever they can see, they pick up, they run that sweeper that we're renting. So they do go out and do that every day.
Okay, so that's first thing in the morning.
Yeah, and to cover the police part, there is in my report here, the police chief provided the issue, or the update that 2 officers riding bikes are working on foot patrols in the public safety corridor, which includes the waterfront. So that's happening too.
I see them around all the time, by the way, so great visibility.
Yeah.
I see them. So are they on any kind of specific schedule, or do they just ride around?
It's going to be decreasing with the summer going down, so
Sure.
we'll have 1 officer going down there, and next year 1 officer leave. Unfortunately, one of those 2 officers is great. Does a great job for us, but we'll still have somebody down there working stuff, just with summer coming close, school back in session, we'll modify it.
That makes sense. Okay. And where are our security cameras? I know that we got some for parks. I don't know if they're all in. I don't know if they're still sitting in Public Works. And I know we had cameras at the construction site, but now that the facility is done, where are they?
We are looking at enhancing it, and that's a discussion with the Public Safety Committee a group that we're talking about enhancing. There's some already, and we're in the process of looking at proposals. There isn't any budget in it for the camera, so we got to deal with the funding issues. So that's something that will probably come to the council at some point as we work it through and develop some cost and options with cameras.
So
the Clean Water Facility has cameras in that project. They are in the process of completing all of the security system work, which includes the fobs for the gate as well as the cameras. And as Mr. Oborn mentioned, there is discussion of expanding that camera system to focus on certain areas of the park as well. But that is not included in the Clean Water Facility budget because that's more of a general fund issue, and we've got the cameras to cover our Clean Water Facility.
So the cameras that we already have and already purchased are covering the Clean Water Facility?
No. An entirely new security system is being installed in the Clean Water Facility. If we can reuse some of the cameras that we have, we will. However, they may not be compatible with the system, so we may need to buy new. Then we're also looking, we're going to be replacing the restrooms at Flintstone. So we're looking at getting that whole camera system maybe tied in with the Clean Water Facility on that server. And I'm not sure how it all works, but bouncing off of something in Howard Maley Park as well. So there is some benefit of piggybacking up the system at the Clean Water Facility. Yes. But since it's for a general fund purpose, the funding has to be independent.
So Tara, I'm sorry if I'm over here, but when we had the conversation, Parks is going to set an appointment for a supplier or a company to come talk with Hank, and I'm going to meet him down there. We're going to identify some stuff in the park, so we then have a barometer to match up with the Clean Water Facility and some other city cameras. Our goal would be to try to have one system rather than a bunch of different ones that can operate similarly. One system, so he's setting up that appointment so we can identify to try to get that process in front of you guys.
The appointments with who?
It's a supplier, a tech firm, and then coordinating with IT here once he gets that set up.
Okay. Someone brought to me a concern about some possibly criminal activity in Windjammer after hours, and my response was, well, we have cameras. So I thought we had cameras in the park, and there were some at the construction site. So I was like, we'll check the cameras. That's my answer. Yeah, so the sooner the better. And when you say public safety committee, did you mean the CAB?
The public safety group involves a few council members and mostly staff from different departments.
So
We
not the
meet,
Citizen Advisory Board?
No.
We have a public safety group?
Yeah.
Is that the official name, chief? Or
Public safety work group. or
public
workshop.
safety work group? And we meet about every 2 weeks. I think 3 council members serve on that, participate in that committee process, and it's a good opportunity for us with the different disciplines, with parks and streets and fire, and also with police department, to kind of all integrate together and to discuss what you're talking about, concerned with safety. Animal control was one of the issues, and I think we're addressing that issue, so it was discussed. So those are some of the topics. And I tried to cover some of the things that come out of that in the police department category.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Any other business? Okay. Seeing none, we will adjourn.